every single year. You can only renew during this 60-day period of November 1st to December 31st. Every loan officer in the world, I just did mine this week. Doesn't matter whether you're here, Connecticut, New Jersey, Hawaii, every loan officer in the world has to give them $330 during this 60-day period. Can you imagine their bank account for this 60 days? That's how they actually do their budget, because they know you have to do it. You can't do it early, and if you do it late, it's going to be almost double that. Okay? And there's tons of loan officers in the world. We all have to give them $330 during this 60-day period. So for the exam, you need to know what the renewal period is. November 1st to December 31st. If you got your license during that time, you don't have to renew. You're grandfathered in. But say if you got your license in October and you paid $330 in October, you still have to pay it by December 31st. So you guys are not in this particular class in that situation because we're already in November. You're in that particular period.
And how much is that?
$330. Let me go ahead and finish this one and then I'll take questions. So the next one says your license is valid for 5 years. Highlight that because that's how you're going to answer the question. How long is your license valid? Well, the answer is going to be for 5 years. What does that mean? Does that mean after 5 years I need to do all of this again? No. It means if you go 5 years without renewing, 5 years without giving them their money, then you have to start all over again. So what if I just went 1 year without renewing, 2 years without renewing, 3 years without renewing? My license is still valid. It's just not active. Well, how do I get it back active? I have to pay the renewal fee for the prior year, not all the years that I missed, just the prior year, and I have to do continuing education for the prior year, then I'm back in the game. But if I let 5 years go by, I have to start all over again with the 20-hour, the background, the test, everything. If you never want to take this test again once you pass, don't go 5 years without giving them their money. Do you get that? Any questions on anything on this page?
Yes. You said grandfather in from November 1st to December 31st.
If you get your license during the period of November 1st to December 31st, it's not going to expire on December 31st because you're getting your license during the renewal period.
Okay, so that's all it means. It still rolls back to the following year, December 31st.
Correct. Go ahead.
If your license is inactive but still valid, you still can.
You can't do anything. Your license is not active. Okay, it just means that, so if your license is inactive, it just means you still have a period of time that you can reactivate it without starting over. But if you let 5 years go by, start all over again. Background check, test, 20-hour class, all that stuff. Go ahead.
How long is the 20-hour
How long is the 20-hour class
class valid for?
valid for? 5 years. How long is your test results valid for? 5 years. I have people that have passed the test and they still haven't gone through and done their MU4. Well, after 5 years, you're going to have to do it all over again. Okay? Because they're just not ready. They're just not ready. It's good for 5 years. Now, a lot of times people have done their 20-hour class 2, 3, 4 years ago. They never took the test. They don't have to do the 20-hour class again, but the information is old. You're not going to be able to pass the test with what you learned from back then. You have to take an updated crash course because this test has changed probably about 7 times now, and it's going to be changing again the first quarter. So you guys want to get this information, take this test, pass this test, be done with it. Got it? Now, when you go to take the test, it's 100% computerized. You will know before you get out of that chair if you pass. You'll be sitting there like, do I press the button? Do I press the button? Because once you do, boom, pass or fail. The people in the front would know as well. Either you're going to walk out and they're going to be like, hey, high five. Or they're going to be like, okay, thank you, see you later. You know, try to avoid you. But you would know right then and there if you passed or not. Take your driver's license or ID in there with you. They're pretty strict on that. Don't bother taking a calculator because you have to use theirs. There has been so much cheating. People have secret codes in their calculators. They had one, they showed us a video, a lady was just pulling up her skirt, answers written on her leg, things of that nature. They don't even let you go to the bathroom by yourself. Someone goes with you. Okay, they don't go in the stall with you, of course, but they go in there with you to make sure that you're not doing any cheating things of that nature. So they're pretty strict about that. The test is 125 questions. 10 of them are questions that they're practicing out. You're only scored on 115. 10 of them are, I call them, like they say, fake news, Trump. I call them fake questions. But you have no idea which 10 those are. And a lot of times people say, well, I'm just going to try to figure out which questions are real and which ones aren't. Who cares? Just try to get them all right, regardless of what they are. But you really only scored on 115 of them. They give you 3 hours to take the test. It does not take 3 hours to take the test. Okay? But they give you 3 hours. It probably takes about an hour, hour and 15 minutes if you're prepared. But when you go to take the test, what happens is a lot of people see that they have a lot of time left, so they keep going through it over and over and over again. That's not good either. I suggest that when you go take the test, you go through it twice. Twice, okay? The first time that you go through it, only answer the questions you 100% know. There's a button that says skip questions. Use it. When you go through that test the first time, if you look at it and you know it like the back of your hand, 20 hours this, 8 hours this, some things you will know. Answer all of those and keep track of what you know. For anything else, skip question. If it's a lot to read, it's a math, don't do those the first round. I went through my whole test, and back then it was only 100 questions, and there were 64 that I just knew like the back of my hand. Then you hit the button that says return to skip questions. They don't get harder. They don't change. There's some myth out there like they'll make them hard. No, they're the same questions. Then you hit the button that says return to skip questions. That's when you sit back in your chair. That's when you look at the screen, pray on the question, rub it like you at the casino, whatever the case may be. But that's when you worry about it. But at that point, either you know it or you don't. Pick an answer and move on. It doesn't make sense to go through the same test 5 times. It's not going to help you, and it's going to confuse you more than anything. Like I said, I had one person that she went through it 5 times, and every time she went through it, she changed something else. She was so mixed up by the end that, of course, she didn't pass. So don't do that. Any questions on anything on this page? All right, so here we go. This is where I want you to have a separate sheet of paper to the side to take notes. Do not try to write all your notes in between these little bitty lines on this screen. There's a possible 4,000 test questions. You're going to get 125. You have no idea what 125 you're going to get. But a lot of them are the same questions asked over and over in different ways. So I start all my classes out with this things to remember section, and then we'll get into some specific things. This first line, let me read it first, and then I'm going to tell you what I want you to highlight. If an application for credit, could be credit for a house, car, boat, doesn't matter. If an application for credit is denied based on the appraisal, ECOA, which is Regulation B, says the borrower has 90 days to request appraisal and the lender has 30 days to deliver it. Highlight ECOA, Regulation B, highlight 90 days, and highlight 30 days. If an application for credit is denied and they say it's based on the appraisal, ECOA says a borrower has 90 days to request a copy of the appraisal. And when they do, a lender has 30 days to deliver it. There's about 30 questions that they come up with from this one particular line. This is how they do it. What law says the borrower has 90 days to request a copy of the appraisal? Well, there are 3 possible answers. One is the Equal Credit Opportunities Act. Another is ECOA. And if they're using letters, another one is Regulation B. Same question, but 3 different ways that they can ask it. What law says the lender has 90 days to deliver it? Equal Credit Opportunities Act, ECOA, Regulation B. 6 questions. How many days does the borrower have to request a copy of the appraisal? If they're using numbers, 90. But what if they're using months? 3. How many days does the lender have to provide it? If they're using numbers, 30 days. If they're using months, 1 month. 10 questions. But it's the same thing. Do you see what I mean? It's not 4,000 different questions. It's just the way that they manipulate the questions. Circle the word appraisal here. Circle the word appraisal. And on top of appraisal, I want you to write value. Value. If an application for credit is denied based on the value, because what does the appraisal give you? It gives you the value. My 10 questions just what? Turned into 20. Now, another way that they ask this that's not so obvious, and I want you to write it in your notes, they're going to ask you, which regulation allows the borrower to challenge the value stated in the appraisal? So I'm going to say that again. What law or which regulation allows the borrower to challenge the value stated in the appraisal? And I want you to go back and either underline or highlight the words challenge the value. Those are buzzwords. Whenever you see challenge the value, I want you to think ECOA, Equal Credit Opportunities Act, Regulation B. Because if you get denied and they say, well, it's because of your appraisal, what's the first thing you're going to want? Let me see a copy of that appraisal. So ECOA, Regulation B, allows the borrower to challenge the value stated in the appraisal. And then they'll go through that same series of questions. How many days do they have to challenge the value? And if they challenge it, how many days does the lender have? That way, my 20 questions just went up to 30. But it doesn't matter if you know, and this is why I don't teach question, answer. You need to understand why the answer is the answer. So in case they ask it to you in a different way, you'll still be able to figure it out. If an application for credit, could be credit for anything, an application for credit is denied, and they say it's based on the value, which is the same thing as saying it's based on the appraisal, ECOA, which is Regulation B, says the borrower has 90 days to request a copy of the appraisal. And when they do, the lender has 30 days to deliver it. That's just the rule. Regardless of how they ask the question, that's just the rule. Got it? Now the next one. I gave you guys a list of acronyms in your packet. Go ahead and pull that out. I call it your cheat sheet. It's a list of acronyms. I want you to find on there ECOA, on there in the E's, and highlight it. Find ECOA. Now ECOA stands for the Equal Credit Opportunities Act. ECOA, Equal Credit Opportunities Act. Highlight that. Okay? And in your notes, I need you to write the following about ECOA. ECOA is about a credit application. ECOA is about a credit application. It's the Equal Credit Opportunities Act. So wherever you're taking notes, ECOA is about a credit application. ECOA is Regulation B. You have to remember that ECOA is Regulation B. It's the law that says that they must be equal when extending credit. You're going to have to remember that ECOA is Regulation B. So the way that I help you remember that ECOA is Regulation B is I want you to write that ECOA is the law that says that they must be equal when extending credit. ECOA is Regulation B. The regulators must be equal when extending credit. What does that mean? They can't discriminate because I'm female and you're male, or because I'm black and you're Latino. No, they have to be equal. ECOA is Regulation B. Sometimes if you know what the law is all about, you can figure out what letter. We're going to be talking about Regulation B, D, N, P, a whole bunch of them. B, it's the law that says that they have to be equal when extending credit. Got it? The next one is HMDA, Regulation C. HMDA, find it on your cheat sheet and highlight it. HMDA, Regulation C. Now, HMDA is the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act. HMDA, Home Mortgage Disclosure Act. Now, wherever you're writing notes, and I told you guys to have a separate sheet of paper for your notes, HMDA is Regulation C. HMDA is Regulation C. How do I help you remember that HMDA is Regulation C? Here we go. HMDA is the law that allows regulators to see where possible discrimination takes place. Maybe if you know what the law is all about, you can remember the letter. HMDA is the law that allows regulators to see where possible discrimination takes place. HMDA just happens to be Regulation C. It's the law that allows regulators to see where possible discrimination takes place. You're going to need more paper. So on the back or something. Okay. Now, they're also going to ask you, where is HMDA information found? Or where is HMDA information collected? HMDA information is found on Section 10. It's written like a Roman letter X. HMDA information is found on Section 10 of the 1003 loan application. Have you ever looked at the back of a loan application and there's a section that says male, female, Hispanic, not? That's the HMDA section. They might even just show you that section that says what law uses this section, Section 10 of the 1003, to identify possible discriminatory practice. HMDA. HMDA is Regulation C. It allows the regulators to see where possible discrimination takes place. Got it? ECOA is Regulation B. The regulators must be equal. HMDA is Regulation C. Allows regulators to see where possible discrimination takes place. The next one I want you to find on your sheet there and highlight is RESPA. RESPA. Now, RESPA is Regulation X. How do I help you remember that RESPA is Regulation X? I just mispronounce it. I call it REXPA, like R-E-X-P-A. So write that down. RESPA equals REXPA, R-E-X-P-A. And that can help you remember that RESPA is Regulation X. Let's call it REXPA. ECOA is Regulation B. The regulators must be equal. HMDA is Regulation C. Allows them to see where possible discrimination takes place. And RESPA, let's call it REXPA to remember that it's Regulation X. Now the next one, find it. It's TILA. TILA. Truth in Lending Act. TILA. Truth in Lending Act. Now TILA is Regulation Z. TILA is Regulation Z. It's one of the biggest ones we're going to go over. And because it's Regulation Z, to remember that it's Regulation Z, we call it TILA the Godzilla. TILA the Godzilla. That will help you remember that TILA is Regulation Z. TILA the Godzilla. Now in your notes, you need to write this about TILA. TILA deals with credit, APR, and advertising of consumer loans. That's even a question. They're going to say, what law deals with credit, APR, and advertising of consumer loans? TILA, the Godzilla, Regulation Z, deals with credit, APR, and advertising of consumer loans. The next one, HIPAA. HIPAA. Find it on your cheat sheet, highlight it, and get ready for a lot of notes. HIPAA, Homeowners Protection Act. There's about 4 things I'm going to have you write down about HIPAA. So HIPAA is the Homeowners Protection Act, and it's all about PMI, private mortgage insurance. HIPAA deals with PMI. So again, 4 things that I want to have you write down about HIPAA. Number 1, HIPAA deals with PMI, not MIP. HIPAA deals with PMI, private mortgage insurance, not MIP. We'll talk about MIP when we get to FHA loans, but that's not what HIPAA is all about. HIPAA is about PMI, private mortgage insurance. Number 2, PMI is on conventional loans, not government. PMI is on conventional loans, not government. Number 3, PMI is required when the borrower puts less than 20% down. When is a borrower required to pay PMI? When they put less than 20% down payment. Then they have to pay PMI. And the last one, PMI protects the lender, not the borrower. They're going to ask you, who does PMI protect? Or who does PMI cover? PMI protects the lender, not the borrower. So those are 4 things that you have to remember about PMI. About HIPAA. HIPAA deals with PMI, not MIP. PMI is on conventional loans, not government loans. PMI is required when the borrower puts less than 20% down. And who does PMI protect? The lender, not the borrower. The next one, SAFE Act. Find SAFE Act on your list of acronyms, and then when you find it, circle the word secure, because that's what people get wrong here. They're going to ask you the SAFE Act stands for, and they're going to have their A, B, C, D. And A is going to say it stands for the Safe and Fair Enforcement Act. It does not. They're trying to trick you. Yes, it's called the SAFE Act, but what does the S stand for? Secure. Don't let them trick you. If they trick you enough, you got to go back and give them another $110. Yes, it's called the SAFE Act, but the S stands for secure. An easy one to get wrong, so don't get it wrong. If you're going to get something wrong, get something good wrong, some math or something like that. And then the next one, find it, HERA. HERA. Housing and Economic Recovery Act, HERA. You need to know that HERA is the law that created the SAFE Act. They're going to say what law created the SAFE Act, or what law came before the SAFE Act. HERA is the law that created the SAFE Act. Next slide. We're going to talk about FACRA. FACRA. Biggest thing that people do wrong with FACRA is they don't know what the FCRA stands for. FACRA. Fair Credit Reporting Act. FACRA. Fair Credit Reporting Act. And FACRA is Regulation V. How do I help you remember that FACRA is Regulation V? Well, FACRA is about a credit report. FACRA is about a credit report. And Regulation V, I say, don't you want to have a very good credit report? That can help you remember that FACRA is Regulation V. It's about credit reports, and I want to have a very good credit report. Now make sure you keep this in mind. ECOA is about a credit application. FACRA is about a credit report, because they're going to try to confuse you. What law deals with a credit application? ECOA. What law deals with a credit report? FACRA. FACRA deals with credit reports and credit reporting agencies. FACRA deals with credit reports and credit reporting agencies. What do I mean when I say credit reporting agencies? Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. FACRA deals with what they can and cannot do. So FACRA is Regulation V, and it deals with credit reports and credit reporting agencies. The next one is the FACT Act. FACT Act. Again, know what the FACT stands for. FACT Act. Fair and Accurate Credit Transaction And whenever they put an A at the end, it's just the word act. Fair and accurate credit transaction act. Sometimes they call it FACTA. Sometimes they call it FACT Act. It's the same thing. Now in your notes, what is FACT Act all about? Identity theft. What law deals with identity theft? The FACT Act. Now the FACT Act, in your notes, also has a section of rules. These rules are called Section 114 rules. Because you could get that question, what law has Section 114 rules? The FACT Act has a separate section of rules called Section 114 rules. Well, what are Section 114 rules? Here we go. Section 114 rules are red flag identity theft rules. Section 114 rules, what's another name for that? Red flag identity theft rules. There are a section of rules that if the lender sees this, packages coming back, they change their address every week, just some things that look a little weird. Those are red flags that they should check to see if there's any identity theft going on. Section 114 rules, aka red flag, aka also known as red flag identity theft rules. The next one, Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, GLBA, Graham-Leach-Bliley Act. So this law was written by 3 senators, Senator Graham, Senator Leach, Senator Bliley. A senator's job is supposed to be to protect people. So I'm trying to give you guys something to kind of make the connection, SPF. SPF, when we see SPF, we think of protection, like sun protection or skin protection. The Graham-Leach-Bliley Act has SPF. 3 laws. They begin with S, P, and F. Safeguarding, pretexting, financial privacy. So find Graham-Leach-Bliley on your cheat sheet and get ready for a lot of notes. Graham-Leach-Bliley, highlight it on your cheat sheet and get ready for a lot of notes on this one. So the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act has 3 policies. Safeguarding policy, pretexting policy, financial privacy policy. It requires 3 policies, SPF. The first one I'm going to talk about is the safeguarding policy. So they're going to ask you a question. What law says that there must be a safeguarding policy? The Graham-Leach-Bliley Act. Then they're going to say, well, what is a safeguarding policy? Here we go. A policy on how companies have to keep our credit card and personal information safe when we use it at their place of business. So I'm going to say it again. What is the safeguarding policy all about? It's a policy. The companies have to have it, just like they have to have an employee manuals and safety policies. It's another policy that they have to have on how they're going to keep our credit card and personal information safe when we use it in their place of business. When Target got in all that trouble with the credit card scams, first thing FBI said is, let us see your safeguarding policy. What do you use? What do you train your people on? When I go to Macy's or Olive Garden or Vons or whatever, and I use my credit card, I should feel safe because they have a policy on what they train their people on how to keep our credit card and personal information safe. Who says they have to have such a policy? The Graham-Leach-Bliley Act. The next policy required by the law is a pretexting policy. Pretexting policy. So what is a pretexting policy? Here we go. A pretexting policy is a policy to keep others from gaining access to your information under false pretenses. And then I want you to underline the words false pretenses. So what law says they have to have a pretexting policy? The Graham-Leach-Bliley Act. What is a pretexting policy? A policy to keep others from gaining access to your information under false pretenses. And I want you to underline the words false pretenses. And then here I also want you to put in parentheses, pretenders. Pretenders. It's a policy to keep others from pretending, from being you and getting into your information. Have you ever locked yourself out of your account and now it asks for your mother's maiden name or your first car, all of those security questions? Those are pretexting policies. Policies to keep people from getting into your stuff under false pretenses. If you're trying to get in your daughter's account or your client's account or your husband's account, you put in the password wrong too many times, it's going to lock you out. That's a pretexting policy. Now you're going to have to answer some security questions to get in. A policy to keep other people from getting into your stuff, from pretending from being you and getting access to your information under false pretenses. That's what a pretexting policy is. And then the last one, which is an F, financial privacy policy. They're going to say, what law says that there must be a financial privacy policy? The Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. Well, what is a financial privacy policy? Here we go. It's a policy that governs the collection of non-public information and how it's shared with affiliates. So I'm going to repeat that. Who says that they have to have a financial privacy policy? The Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. What is a financial privacy policy? A policy, no, what did I say? It governs the collection, let's start with this. It governs the collection of non-public information. And go back and highlight or underline non-public information and how it's shared with affiliates. Non-public information is information that someone couldn't Google on you. When you fill out a loan application, you may be putting your bank account numbers there, your social security number, some personal information. Well, this policy governs what they can collect on you. When I go to Chase or Wells Fargo and I fill out an application, it governs what they can collect on me and what they can share with their affiliates. All these companies, they share your information. Well, this policy governs what they can collect and what they can share. This is why you get a lot of junk mail. This is why you get a lot of spam, because they're sharing your information. I have Chase. Chase is associated with Providian. I get offers from Providian. Providian is associated with Capital One, so I get offers from them. That's why you get so much spam. That's why you get so much these flyers and stuff in your mailbox, because they share your information. But this policy governs what they can collect on you, number one, and it governs of that information what they can actually share with their affiliates. And I want you to write in parentheses here, opt in, opt out. They have to give you the opportunity to opt in or opt out of having your personal information shared. That's even a question. What law says that they have to give you an opportunity to opt in and opt out of having your personal information shared? The financial privacy portion of the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. So the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act has SPF, Safeguarding Pretexting Financial Privacy.
Is there a law prior to that?
Not sure, not on the test, so we're just doing test stuff. HOPA loans. Find HOPA on your cheat sheet and highlight it. HOPA loans. Now HOPA, Home Ownership and Equity Protection Act, HOPA loans. I call them hard money loans, like what you would get at Cash Call or Ditech or some of the hard money lenders. Excuse me. For the exam, we only care about 2 HOPA loans. There's several out there, but we only care about 2 for the exam. HOPA Section 32, which are called high cost. I'm going to go through later what would make it a high cost loan. But right now, I need you to associate 32 with high cost. And then there's Section 35, which are high priced. Section 32 are high cost HOPA loans. Section 35 are high price. They're going to try to trick you. Remember that 35 is high price, 32 is high cost. Now, regardless of what type of HOPA loan it is, it's all a part of TILA. Remember I told you TILA is the Godzilla, and a lot of stuff comes under TILA. Okay? So they could say, HOPA loans are part of which larger law? The answer would be TILA. Section 32 loans are part of which larger law? The answer would be TILA. High cost loans are part of which large, get my point? That's how they come up with 4,000 different questions. It's the same stuff that they ask it in different ways. Got it? Now, AFBA, find it, AFBA, affiliated business arrangement. And you notice I have here 1%, not 10%. 1%, not 10%. An affiliate business arrangement is a disclosure that you have to give your client if you're referring them to a business that you also have part ownership in, and now you're going to be making money off of them in that business as well. The question on the exam is, if you own more than what percent are you then required to disclose it? You're already doing a loan for me, and then I tell you, you know what, Susan, I could also use a roofer or a contractor, and you look into your wallet and you give me a card and say, hey, use this company. If you own a part of that company you're trying to get me to use, you're supposed to tell me that. That's what an affiliate business arrangement disclosure is. Again, the question on the exam is, if you own more than what percent are you then required by law to tell me? People think it's 10. They don't want to pick 1 because they think it's too low, but that's what the answer is, 1%. And then they're going to say, when must that disclosure be made? The best answer is immediately. When must the affiliate business arrangement disclosure be made? The best answer is immediately. But if immediately is not one of the options there in A, B, C, D, then the next best answer is prior to doc signing. You should let them know before they get committed. Prior to doc signing. If both immediate and prior to doc signing are in the A, B, C, D, immediate is still the best.
You know, more than 1 or 1?
1% or more.
1%.
Now this next one, Civil Rights Act. It's not on your cheat sheet, but listen to what I'm telling you about the Civil Rights Act. Any question you get, any question you get with the word Civil Rights Act, the answer is about race. And they're going to try to trick you. And if you get one of these questions, you will get the other. So listen and let's see. And it goes right over a lot of people's head. And those of you guys that took my 20-hour class, you already know this. So let the other ones try. They're going to ask you, and I'm going to ask you 2 questions. Which of the following can you not discriminate against? Age, race, religion, all of the above. Which of the following can you not discriminate against? Age, race, religion, all of the above. What's the answer? All of the above. Then you get another question, and you'll think you got a free question. Oh my God, they asked me the same question twice. But it's going to say, which of the following, according to the Civil Rights Act, can you not discriminate against? Age, race, religion, all of the above. Then you have to pick race. But that goes right over someone's head. Anyone need me to repeat that?
Yes.
Got it? Okay. So listen to me. First of all, I told you any question you get about the Civil Rights Act, the answer is going to be race. These are not the same 2 questions. Which of the following can you not discriminate against? Age, race, religion, all of the above. You can't discriminate against any of those. So the answer would be all of the above, right?
Yes.
Then they ask you again, or you think they're asking you the same thing. Which of the following, according to the Civil Rights Act, that specific law, can you not discriminate against? Age, race, religion, all of the above. Race. Do you get my point?
Yes.
Don't let it go over your head. And what happens is people are so anxious to finish the test, they just see which of the following, and they go to D. You didn't read it. It's a little bit different. Don't be in so much of a rush. Got it? Now they do the same thing with this one. You have to know that an escrow account, well, that's the same thing as an impound account. Well, that's the same thing as a reserve account. That's the account where the lender takes the money for your taxes and insurance to put with your mortgage payment. In California, we call it an escrow account. They escrowed our taxes and insurance. Well, some states call that an impound account. They impounded our taxes and insurance, where others call it a reserve account. I had one lady that got all 3 questions on the test. She said she answered each one of them differently to make sure she got at least one right. No. They want to know, again, you're going to be able to do loans in over 48, 49 states. They want to know that you know the language. An escrow account is the same as an impound account. It's the same as a reserve account. It's the account where the lender takes the money to put your taxes and insurance so that when you make your payment, you're making one payment to cover all. Now, they will ask you what type of a mortgage did that create. Write this down. If it's escrowed, impound, or has a reserve account, what type of a mortgage did that just create? It created what's called a budget mortgage. Budget. If it's escrowed, impound, or reserved, it created a budget mortgage. Well, what the heck is a budget mortgage? Write this down. Budget mortgage equal PITI mortgage. It's just a mortgage that has budgeted for the PITI, the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. And when you paid that mortgage, you paid everything required with that payment. So that was our warm-up. We haven't actually started today's class. I'm going to give you guys a quick break before we actually start today's class, but you should be sufficiently warmed up. That's how it's going to go. Everything that I went over, I will go over again, but I need you guys to hear it at least 3 times. 1, I just did it. Again, I'm going to do it a little bit slowly, and then you should listen to this recording over and over and over again. That's why we give it to you. So I want to talk about the federal section. 5 sections of the exam. We're going to go over the federal section right now, which is the most difficult part. When they polled people that passed the test and didn't pass the test, the pass rate right now, as of last week, it's 62%. That means almost 40% of the people that take the test fail it. Over 40% or almost 40% of the people that take the test fail it. That's because as brokers, agents, we think we already know stuff, or we took this class online and we got a false sense of hope, or we just think this test is about mortgages and real estate, and only about 20-25% of it is. The rest of it is about rules, regulations, laws, regulation N, P, D, all of that kind of stuff, and you don't know that going in. And if you took your 20-hour class online, you probably didn't pay a lot of attention. You probably just clicked next, next, next while you were watching TV, handling business, things of that nature. This section is the federal section. Of all the people that failed, 72% failed this section. So that's why we spend a lot of time on the federal section. I'm going to get started with the CFPB. So you guys should be following me along the slides. Everything that you see on the slides is in the little pamphlet there. CFPB. CFPB stands for Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. CFPB. CFPB. I call the CFPB the new sheriff in town. That's who's coming in making all these rules, regulations, changes, things of that nature. The CFPB. For the exam, you need to know that CFPB stands for Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. You also need to know the 2 entities, the 2 laws that created the CFPB. And that is the Dodd-Frank Act, highlight that, and the Consumer Finance Protection Act. Those are the 2 entities that created the CFPB. Now, all of these organizations here now have to report to the CFPB. They used to be their own boss, but not anymore. Like HUD. HUD didn't have to answer to anyone but HUD, but not anymore. Now they have to answer to the CFPB. The FTC, all of these now have to answer to the CFPB. Why? Because when the whole mortgage meltdown happened, they went to HUD and said, what do you think happened? They were like, we don't know. They went to the FDIC. What do you think happened? We don't know. They went to all of these entities that deal with money and banking to kind of get advice on why do you think this happened. No one had any answers. So that's why they created the CFPB. Now, all of these entities now have to answer to the CFPB. They're not standalone anymore. They all have a boss now, which is the CFPB. Now, any entity that deals with money and banking must report to the CFPB. On the exam, there's one that they try to trick you with that does not report to the CFPB. The Fair Housing Act. Make yourself a note. The Fair Housing Act does not report to the CFPB. Why? Because it doesn't deal with money and banking. It's about discrimination. Fair Housing Act has nothing to do with money or banking. It's about discrimination, but they try to trick you with that. So I kind of let you guys know the Fair Housing Act does not report to the CFPB, but all of these here do report to the CFPB.
Because it has nothing to do with banking?
Money or banking. It's about discrimination. So I want to start with RESPA. We're going to talk about RESPA now. RESPA is Regulation X. I call it REXPA. The purpose of RESPA is to help consumers become better shoppers for settlement services. Highlight settlement services. That's my buzzword. When you see settlement services, I want you to be thinking RESPA. Just so you know what settlement services are, that just means escrow stuff. But on the exam, what law deals with settlement services? RESPA. The purpose of RESPA is to help consumers become better shoppers for settlement services. Now, RESPA deals with 1 to 4 unit residential property. What type of property does RESPA deal with? 1 to 4 unit residential property. Everything on this test is about 1 to 4 unit residential property. Does not apply to commercial. You don't need this license to do commercial. This license is all about residential property. Another name for residential property is owner-occupied property. Now, RESPA does not deal with all cash sales, rental property of more than 4, commercial property, or property of 25 acres or more. Property of 25 acres or more is also called agricultural property. Make sure you know that. So you're going to get questions like this. Which of the following is covered by RESPA? Which of the following is not covered by RESPA? It's a 3-unit apartment building and the owner stays in unit A. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. It's a 4-unit apartment building and all 4 units are rented out. No. It's a single family resident and my mom stays in there and pays $500 a month rent. No, my mom stays in it. It's not owner occupied. See how they're trying to trick you? It's a 10-unit apartment building and I stay in unit A. No, because it's more than 4. It's a 4-unit. I stay in unit A. I got such a good deal, I paid all cash for the property. No. So you have to know the rule. Because can you imagine how many scenarios, how many questions they can come up with? But you need to know RESPA deals with 1 to 4 unit residential property. The borrower has to stay in 1. It does not deal with all cash sales, rental property of more than 4, commercial property, or property of 25 acres or more, also known as agricultural property. That's just the rule. The penalty for violating RESPA, $10,000 and up to 1 year in jail. The penalty for violating RESPA is $10,000 and up to 1 year in jail. It's the only one that has the and up to 1 year in jail. If I were to say what law has a penalty of $10,000, you can probably name a few. But if I said what law has a penalty of $10,000 and up to 1 year in jail, there's only RESPA. Only RESPA. You guys get that? Now, there are several sections of RESPA, but for the exam, I only care about 4, and you need to know which 4 those are. Again, several sections of RESPA. In your 20-hour class, they probably talked about a bunch of sections, but for the exam, we only care about 4 sections. That's Section 6, that deals with mortgage servicing, Section 8, 9, and 10. So I'm going to start with RESPA Section 6. Section 6 deals with mortgage servicing and mortgage servicing abuses. Again, RESPA Section 6 deals with mortgage servicing and mortgage servicing abuses. You need to know what a mortgage servicer is. A servicer may not be the company that actually, or the actual investor of the loan. They're just the company that's been hired to handle the payments and to pay the taxes and insurance. That's what a servicer does. Collects the monthly payments and handles the taxes and insurance. What law deals with mortgage servicing and mortgage servicing abuses? RESPA Section 6. RESPA Section 6. There's a lot of things that servicers did wrong. Not applying people's payments on time, not paying their taxes and insurance, not giving them loan mods, not giving them short sale, holding up the process. What law deals with mortgage servicers and mortgage servicing abuses? RESPA Section 6. Section 8 deals with kickbacks, fee splitting, and unearned fees. What law deals with kickbacks, fee splitting, and unearned fees? RESPA Section 8. Prohibits giving or accepting. You're just as guilty if you accepted the gift. Well, I didn't give it. I didn't do it. They gave it to me. You're just as guilty. You cannot take referral fees. That's what they call kickbacks in mortgages. Well, in real estate, we can do this. This is not a real estate exam. In mortgages, you cannot take referral fees for services. They call that a kickback. A thing of value means anything of value. They can give you, the title company can give you pens with their names on it and stickies and all of that stuff, but they can't give you a Gucci purse, Dodger tickets, suites to Vegas in exchange. That would be considered a kickback, and that would be a violation of RESPA Section 8. It also prohibits what's called fee splitting. So what is fee splitting? Splitting your money with an unlicensed person. Now, this happens every day, but after you get licensed, you can't say you didn't know that this was wrong. Fee splitting. You have a loan, but you don't have your license. So you say, oh, Tricia, can you do it? Because I don't have my license, so I can't put it in my name. Can you do it? I do the loan, I get paid, you found out I got paid, then you want me to meet you down the street to give you your half. You don't have a half. I can't split my fee with you. You are an unlicensed agent. Do you get that? Like I say, people do this all the time, but if they get in trouble, they're going to be in trouble. You cannot split your fee with an unlicensed person. Unearned fees, that means two other words that they use for that is upfront fees and advance fees. You cannot take money upfront from the borrower. You can't take advance fees. You can't say, I'm going to do this loan for you. I'm going to get paid at the end. I'm going to charge you 2 points, 3 points. But to start, you need to give me $500. You can't do that. How do you get paid in mortgages and real estate? If and when the deal closes. You cannot take unearned fees. Two other words that they use for that are upfront fees and advance fees. If you do that, what law are you violating? RESPA Section 8. Section 9.
So you could take it after it closes?
RESPA Section 9 deals with title insurance. Title insurance. Any question you get about title insurance is RESPA Section 9. Prohibits the seller from requiring the home buyer to use a particular title company as a condition of the sale. Another one that people do all the time because they don't know the rules, they don't know the laws. And I come across this a lot. Prohibits the seller from requiring the home buyer to use a particular title company as a condition of the sale. You cannot make them use a certain title company. But then people say, but seller chooses all services. That applies to everything except for title. That applies to everything except for title. And a lot of brokers still don't know that. You cannot make them use a particular title company. I've had this where I had a client, she looked at everything and she said, this is all great, but I don't want to use this title company. So I had to go back to the broker and said, this is all great, but do you have another title company? She doesn't want to use this title company. He was like, well, what do you mean she doesn't want to use this title company? Seller chooses all services. Well, that applies to everything except for title. Do you have another title company? Well, this is who we use. This is what's wrong with these people. We like them. They do great. We've used them for years. I didn't say anything was wrong with them. I just said that my bar doesn't want to use that title company. Well, he said, if you don't use this title company, we're not going to sell you this house. This is who we use. And I tried to educate him and say, well, you can't say that. He says, yes, I can. Seller chooses all services. And I was trying to tell him, but that applies to everything except for title. But he was adamant about it. And he said, if you don't use this title company, we're not going to sell you this house. And I told him, you're violating RESPA Section 9. He says, well, I don't know what the hell that is, but if you don't use this title company, we're not going to sell you this house. He just didn't know. He was old school. He didn't know the new rules, regulations. So I had to go back to my bar and says, he just doesn't know, and he's adamant. And if you don't use his title company, they're not going to sell you this house. So you have to decide whether you want to go with this or we want to go find another house. She said, well, I don't want to lose the house over this. Fine, just use this title company. We did. Everything went fine. There was no problem at all. We didn't say anything was wrong with their title company. But then after that, I gave her the emails where he put in writing, if you don't use our title company, we're not going to sell you this house. She was able to go back and sue him for 3 times the amount she paid for title insurance. Why? Because he made it a condition of the sale. And he can't. And the law says if they do, you can sue for 3 times the amount. And another word that they use for that is treble damages for the amount paid for title insurance. This only applies to title. RESPA Section 9 is about title insurance. Section 10 deals with escrow accounts. 2 other words I told you that they use in place of escrow accounts are impound accounts and reserve accounts. RESPA Section 10 deals with escrow accounts. An escrow account is the account where the lender takes the money for your taxes and insurance to put with your payment. You need to know what they can do each month and what they can do at closing. Each month, the lender can take no more than 1/12 of the annual amount of the taxes and insurance. Why 1/12? Because there's 12 months in a year. With January, they can take the January portion. February, they can take the February portion. They can't take anything up front. With this January monthly payment, you can take the January portion of my taxes. And with February, the February portion. 1/12, highlight that. That's what you want to see. Let me finish. At closing, they can take a cushion of up to 2 months. At closing, they can take a cushion. Highlight the word cushion and 2 months. Now, this is where people tell me, well, I've seen where they've taken the next 6 months of taxes. Okay? That's something totally different. If the taxes are due, they can take this next 6 months of taxes and still take the cushion. Again, I'm trying to show you how to pass the test. If they ask you how much of a cushion, what does your answer need to be? 2 months. Okay? And with each month, they can take no more than what? 1/12. If taxes are due and they take the 6 months of taxes and the cushion, great. Okay? But for the exam, what is the most that they can take as a cushion or a buffer? 2 months. Now, RESPA Section 10 also requires that they conduct an annual escrow analysis. How many of you guys own a home and your taxes and insurance is included? If that's the case, every year they give you a statement that says, this is all the taxes and insurance we took out every month. This is when we paid it. They have to give you that statement every single year. Okay? You don't want to go 5 years and find out you've been paying too much. You don't want to go 5 years and find out you haven't paid enough and now they want it all at one time. That's why they have to do it annually. What law says they have to do it annually? RESPA Section 10 says they have to conduct an annual escrow analysis, meaning once a year. If they took $50 or more too much, highlight the 50. They're going to ask you, at what point would they be required to return any money? If they took $50 or more too much, then they'd have to give it back.
But if borrower sends the money towards principal and they don't...
That's not on the test. We're doing what you need to know to pass the test. Now, you need to know what makes up a complete application. These are the 6 items that make up a complete application. And if the lender gets all 6 of these items, then they have to give out what's called the initial disclosures. You need to know when the lender has to give out the initial disclosures if they get a complete application. So you need to know what's considered a complete application. These 6 items here. Now, next to where it says address of subject property, things you may see that are okay. If it says UNK, that means unknown. That's okay. If it says TBD, to be determined. That's okay. What's never okay, and they try to trick you, is if it says NA. NA is never allowed. So they're going to ask you on the test, which of the following is never allowed? If they put NA. If it's a refinance, it'll have an address there. But if it's a purchase, maybe you don't know the property yet. So it could be UNK or TBD, but it cannot be NA. Does that make sense to you? Great. So again, if a complete application is collected, then the borrower must get what's called the initial disclosures. You need to know the 2 instances when they would not have to get the initial disclosures. These are called exceptions. Now, I'm going to tell you in a few minutes what are the initial disclosures, but you need to know in which instance or when is it an exception when the lender does not have to give the borrower the initial disclosures. There are 2. If the lender receives a complete application, but the borrower withdraws the application within the first 3 days, they don't have to give them all that initial disclosures. So that's 1. If the applicant withdraws the application within the first 3 days, even though the lender got a complete application, they don't have to give out all those initial disclosures. They don't have to waste all that paper. Or if the lender turns it down before the 3rd day, they do not have to give out the initial disclosures. They can just give a 1-page denial letter instead of all the initial disclosures. And then I'm going to show you what the initial disclosures are in a few minutes. So you need to know in which instances would the lender not be required to give out the initial disclosures. 1, if the applicant withdraws the application before the 3rd day, or 2, if the lender turns it down before the 3rd day. But if that does not happen, the lender has to give out what's called the initial disclosures. They have to give them out at or within 3 days of the application. So let's look at this chart here. And on top of this chart, I want you to first write the words, RESPA deals with timing. RESPA deals with timing. RESPA talks about not so much what they have to get, but when they have to get it. Now, disclosures are simply notices that the borrower must get. RESPA deals with what notices they have to get out when. RESPA deals with timing. According to RESPA, there's 4 different time frames, and you'll see them all here, 4 different time frames. There's at or within 3 days of the application. Certain things RESPA says they have to get. Then there's where it says before settlement. Where I have before settlement, I want you to write before doc signing. So over here where it says before settlement, I want you to write before doc signing. And then there's at settlement. Where it says at settlement, I want you to write at the doc signing. And then after doc signing, there's some things that RESPA said they still should be getting. So according to RESPA, there's 4 different time frames. At or within 3 days of the application, some things they have to get. Before settlement, meaning before they get docs, certain things they have to get. At settlement, meaning at the actual doc signing, while you're sitting there with the notary, certain things they have to get. And then after signing, even after the loan has been closed, there's still some things that RESPA says that they have to get. Those are the 4 different time frames. RESPA talks about when they must get certain documents. Now, the next thing that I want you to do is take a circle, a pen, and circle all of these here. These are what's called, and make yourself a note, the initial disclosures. They're going to ask you questions. What are the initial disclosures? Where they are these 4 documents. When would the borrower get the initial disclosures? At or within 3 days of the application. What are the exceptions? If the applicant or the application has been withdrawn within the first 3 days, or the lender turns it down within the first 3 days, they don't get the initial disclosures. But if that doesn't happen, they get the initial disclosures. Well, what are the initial disclosures? These 4 documents here. So they're going to ask you questions, and the reason why I'm stressing that, they're going to ask you questions. Which of the following is one of the initial disclosures? Which of the following is not one of the initial disclosures? If you know what the 4 initial disclosures are, you can't get it wrong. Okay? Then they're going to ask you, when would the borrower get the home loan toolkit? At or within 3 days of the application. When would the borrower get the loan estimate? at or within 3 days of the application. You get my point? That's how they come up with 4,000 different questions. The information is all there. They're just breaking it down into little bitty chunks. So now I want to talk about each of these initial disclosures. The first one that I'm going to talk about is the home loan toolkit. The home loan toolkit. I want you to put next to that, for purchases only. The home loan toolkit is a booklet that must be given out to people that are doing a purchase loan. For purchases only. It's just a little workbook that tells them how purchases work. When do they have to get that? At or within 3 days of the application. It's one of the initial disclosures. The next one is the loan estimate. What I want you to write next to the loan estimate is formerly the good faith estimate. It used to be called the GFE, but now it's called the loan estimate. You notice that I have it in red there and it says TILA. This is why. It's not a RESPA document. It's a TILA document. RESPA just says when they have to get it. I'm going to say that again. The loan estimate is not a RESPA document. It's a TILA document. RESPA just says when they have to get it. So here's the question. What law says the borrower has to get a loan estimate? TILA. What law says the borrower has to get a loan estimate at or within 3 days of the application? RESPA. Because RESPA deals with when they have to get it, not so much what they have to get. So the loan estimate is a TILA document. It's required by TILA. RESPA just says that they have to get it at or within 3 days of the application. The next one. The mortgage servicing disclosure statement. What I want you to write next to that is the word intent. I-N-T-E-N-T. The mortgage servicing disclosure statement tells the lender's intent on whether they intend to service the loan themselves or if they're going to let somebody else service it. When I first got my loan, it was with IndyMac, and then it went to SLS, and then it went to Ocwen. They let someone else collect the payments and pay the taxes and insurance. But the mortgage servicing disclosure statement tells their intent. We're going to fund your loan and you're going to make your payments to us forever. That'll never change. Or we're going to fund your loan, but we reserve the right later, maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now. We haven't decided, but we may let someone else service it. We're just letting you know right now that that's a possibility, that they have to let you know their intent. So the mortgage servicing disclosure statement tells the lender's intent on whether they're going to service the loan themselves for the whole life of the loan or their intent that they might, they don't know, let someone else service it. And a list of HUD counselors, that's pretty self-explanatory. What was going on is that borrowers were saying, I don't believe my loan officer, I don't believe escrow, I don't believe anybody. Who can I talk to? So the CFPB says you have to give them a list of HUD counselors. And when they get a loan, their packet, they'll get a list of HUD counselors who has nothing to do with the transaction that they can ask questions to. Those are the initial disclosures. When does the borrower get the initial disclosures? At or within 3 days of the application. Unless the application has been withdrawn within the first 3 days or the lender turned it down. Otherwise, this is what they get at or within 3 days of the application. Now, before settlement, before doc signing, they get that AFBA disclosure. Remember I told you that 1%. If you're referring them to a business that you have part ownership in, you're supposed to tell them immediately. But if you didn't tell them immediately, you have to tell them before they sign docs. That's all this is saying. And then they get the closing disclosure. Next to where it says closing disclosure, I want you to write formerly the HUD. It used to be called the HUD. Now it's called the CD, closing disclosure. When do they get it? 2 times. 3 days before doc signing, and then again at the doc signing. And it should be the same. Don't give me something to review 3 days before, and then when I get to the actual signing, it's different. If that's the case, I get 3 more days. Okay? So when do they get the closing disclosure? 3 days prior. It used to be called the HUD 1. And when it was the HUD 1, when did they get it? 1 day before. But the CFPB says 1 day before to review all of this? That doesn't make sense. That's not enough time. We're changing the document. It's now going to be called the closing disclosure. And we want them to get it 3 days before doc signing. We think that that's adequate enough. Now, it's in red as well because it's a TILA document. RESPA just says when they have to get it. What law says they have to get the closing disclosure? TILA. What law says that they get it 3 days before and then again at the DAC signing? RESPA, because RESPA deals with timing. And then the initial escrow statement, they get that after docs, at the doc signing. It's just a statement that says how much their taxes and insurance are. They're not really going to ask you about that. After settlement, they're going to get the annual escrow statement. Remember I told you that's a statement that you get every year that says when they actually paid your taxes and insurance. How often do you get it? Annually. What law says you have to get it? RESPA Section 10. And the borrower will get the servicing transfer statement. Now up here in the mortgage servicing disclosure, they said we might let someone else service your loan. We don't know. We'll let you know, but we may. But down here at the servicing transfer statement, we sold the servicing of your loan. Don't make your payments to us anymore. Start making them over here. This is when they actually did it. Another name for it is the goodbye letter. Goodbye. Don't make your payments to us anymore. Start making them over here. The question is going to be, when must they get that servicing transfer statement or that goodbye letter? 15 days prior. 15 days prior to the transfer. And the borrower is not penalized, meaning no late payment, no ding on their credit, if they accidentally make their payment to the old lender. That's going to fly for 60 days. Okay. Oh, I didn't know it changed. I didn't open my mail. Oh, I had it going out directly and my bank still sent it to the old lender. That's good for 60 days. After 60 days, you're going to be held accountable for it. Now, all of these disclosures on this page are RESPA disclosures, except for two. The loan estimate and the closing disclosure are TILA documents. But every other document here is a RESPA document. That's important because they're going to ask you what law says they have to get the servicing transfer statement. RESPA. What law says that they have to get the AFBA? RESPA. What law says they have to get a list of HUD counselors? RESPA. But what law says they have to get the loan estimate? TILA. So they're going to ask you a series of these, and then they're going to throw in the TILA and those just to kind of throw you off. If you know, you know. And they can't trick you. Got it? A couple other things you need to know about the loan estimate. I told you it used to be called a good faith estimate. No fee except for the credit report fee can be collected before they get the loan estimate. Now the loan estimate is an estimate of what the fees are. It's an estimate. These aren't the actual costs. This is what we estimate this is going to cost. Do you want to move forward? They can't charge you for appraisal, inspection, and all that stuff. You haven't agreed to the estimate. The only thing that they can charge you before they get the loan estimate is for the credit report fee. That's it. The terms on the loan estimate must be good for 10 business days. How long is this estimate good for? 10 business days. Couple of new terms that they came out with. One is called the TIP. You need to know what the TIP means. Total interest percentage. And what is the difference between the TIP and the APR? Because people are confusing them, which I don't understand why, but let me explain it. The TIP, the total interest expressed as a percentage. Just the interest expressed as a percentage. The APR, the interest plus all the other fees added together, expressed as a percentage. What's the difference between the TIP and the APR? The TIP is only the interest expressed as a percentage. The APR is the interest plus all the other fees added together, expressed as a percentage. Make sure you understand the difference in the definition. And then you need to know about the rate lock, or they'll call it the lock. When they call it the lock or the rate lock, it's the same thing. They're going to ask you, where do you find information about the lock or the rate lock? If the rate is locked, how long it's locked, when the lock expires, anything you need to know about the lock, also known as the rate lock, is only found on the loan estimate and the loan estimate only. You won't find that information anywhere else. Information about the rate lock is found on the loan estimate. The closing disclosure, this is no longer an estimate. These are the actual fees now. The loan estimate was an estimate of what it's going to cost. The closing disclosure, this is not an estimate anymore. This is what it's actually going to cost you. The actual fees. It used to be called the HUD 1. You need to know who completes the closing disclosure for whom, because that has changed. Who completes the closing disclosure for whom? Look at that third bullet. The creditor, meaning the bank, the lender, completes it for the borrower. Well, that's who they're getting the money from, so that makes sense. The bank completes it for the borrower, and the settlement agent, meaning title or escrow, completes it for the seller. Now, in real life, and this is what people do, they confuse what happens in real life with how to pass the test. Okay? In real life, most of the time, the lenders will give it to escrow and let escrow give it to the borrower. Okay? But on the exam, it's going to say, but who's ultimately responsible for giving it to the borrower? If the lender gives it to the escrow and let escrow gives it to the borrower and something's wrong with it, who is ultimately responsible for the information getting to the borrower? The creditor, the lender. Okay. Again, the closing disclosure are the actual fees, the actual cost. They get it 3 days before doc signing, and again at the doc signing. 3 days before the doc signing, and again at the doc signing. And if any of these three things down here at the bottom change, then they get a new 3-day waiting period. Those are called valid change in circumstances. When would the bar get a new closing disclosure? If they give them out the closing disclosure, but then they change the APR, well, they get a new 3 days. They give them the closing disclosure, and then they change it from fixed to adjustable. Well, they have to do the paperwork over. They're going to give you scenarios, and they're going to ask you, in which instance would the bar need to get a new closing disclosure? If it's one of these three things, then they have to get a new closing disclosure. And that new closing disclosure means a new 3-day waiting period. That's why you want to work with a good escrow company, because if they keep changing things at the last minute, it can add days and days and days onto your deal. I've had one where they changed something. We had to go 3 more days. Then they changed it again. It was like 9 days. And then that Monday was a holiday, so they were it was taking forever to get paid because they kept making mistakes. If any of these three things change, then they have to give a new closing disclosure, hence a new 3-day waiting period. That's where I'm going to stop with RESPA. The next thing that we're going to talk about is TILA, the Godzilla. But before we do that, we're going to take a break. No, I'm good. TILA, the Godzilla, Truth in Lending Act, Regulation Z. TILA deals with credit, APR, and advertising of consumer loans. What law deals with credit, APR, and advertising of consumer loans? TILA, Truth in Lending Act, Regulation Z. It requires lenders to disclose the complete cost of credit. Highlight those words, complete cost of credit. That's a buzzword. What law requires lenders to disclose the complete cost of credit? Which means they have to tell you the whole story. Yes, you're getting this house for $300,000, but after 30 years, you will have paid blank. They have to tell you the whole thing up front. That's what they mean when they say disclose the complete cost of credit. What law says they have to give you that information up front? Yes, you're buying this diamond ring for $2,000, but you're financing it for 5 years. So after 5 years, you will have paid blank. They have to disclose the complete cost of credit. Get that? Now, TILA is also the law that established what's called the 3-day right of rescission rule. 3-day right of rescission rule. Now, rescission just means changing your mind. If you know what the 3-day right of rescission rule is, it says that in a HELOC, home equity line of credit, or a refinance, even though the borrower signs docs, they have 3 days to change their mind. But in a purchase, they have 0 days. There is no right of rescission. What law made up that rule? TILA. TILA is the law that established the 3-day right of rescission rule. Now, there are some things you need to know about the 3-day right of rescission rule. It only takes one borrower to change their mind. If 4 of us go together to buy a house and we're all on the loan and one person changed their mind, it's dead for all of us. Only takes one borrower to change their mind. Also, the rescission period starts the day after the docs are signed. So there's a 3-day rescission period. The day they sign is not day 1. The next day is day 1. And in fact, the rescission period is not up until midnight of the 3rd day. So here's my example. Mary signed docs on Monday. When is the 3-day rescission period up? A says Tuesday. No. B says Wednesday. No. C says Thursday. Well, could be. But D says midnight on Thursday. Then the one that says midnight on Thursday is the most correct answer. But what if D said Friday? Then it would have been Thursday. Do you get that? So you have to pay attention. And you have to pick the most correct answer. The most correct answer. Also, if there was any money collected and the borrower rescinds, how long does escrow have to give them back their money? 20 calendar days. 20 days. Also, how many copies of the right to rescind must the borrower receive? How many copies? 2. A borrower must receive 2 copies of the right to rescind. That means that they were properly notified of the right to rescind. Here's a question that you may see. If a borrower was not properly notified of the right to rescind, if a borrower was not properly notified of the right to rescind, properly notified means they got 2 copies, how long can the rescission period possibly be extended to? Anyone knows? 3 years. 3 years. So I'm going to say that again. If a borrower was not properly notified of their right to rescind, meaning they didn't get 2 copies, how long can the rescission period possibly be extended to? The answer is 3 years. Or they can say if the borrower didn't receive 2 copies of the right to rescind at closing, how long can the rescission period be extended? 3 years.
That's 3 more years.
Mm-hmm. But they're just going to say 3 years on the test. 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year. The answer is going to be 3 years. Now, TILA applies when there are more, please underline more. TILA applies when there are more than 4 installments. What do I mean? Have you ever listened to Home Shopping Network or QVC? 3 payments or less, 4 payments or less. Why? Why do they want to stay to 3 payments and 4 payments? Because they don't want to deal with TILA. TILA rules and regulations do not apply unless there are more than 4 payments. That's why QVC, Home Shopping Network, all of those, 3 payments or less, 4 payments or less, so they don't have to go by TILA rules and regulations. TILA kicks in when there are more than 4 installments. You're buying a car, you're going to get TILA disclosures, all those long paperwork, if you're going to pay for it in more than 4 installments. You're buying a house, you're buying whatever. If you're going to pay for it in 1 payment, 2 payments, 3 payments, 4 payments, no TILA documents. You just get a receipt. But if you're buying it and then you're paying for it on credit in more than 4 installments, which means 5, but they're not going to say 5, they're going to say more than 4, then TILA kicks in. Got it? Now, the only fee that can be collected before TILA disclosures is for the credit report. TILA disclosures must be kept for 2 years. Highlight that. But there's an exception to this rule. So you have to know the exceptions. If it's the loan estimate, it has to be kept for 3 years. If it's the closing disclosure, it has to be kept for 5 years. So you have to really pay attention. If they say, how long must TILA disclosures be kept? They didn't say any particular one, just generic, how long must TILA disclosures be kept? The answer is 2 years. But if they specifically say, how long must the loan estimate be kept? And I know it's a TILA document, but it's an exception to the rule. How long must the loan estimate be kept? 3 years. How long must the closing disclosure be kept? 5 years. You have to know the exceptions. How long must TILA disclosures be kept? 2 years. But what about the closing disclosure? That's a TILA disclosure 5. And the loan estimate 3. So make sure you understand that those are exceptions to the rule. Now, what are the TILA disclosures? We talked earlier about the RESPA disclosures. Now I want to talk about what are the TILA disclosures, disclosures that are required by TILA. Where the loan estimate and the closing disclosure, those are TILA documents. RESPA just says when you get them, but they are actually TILA documents. Another TILA document is the CHARM booklet. You need to know what CHARM stands for. Consumer Handbook on Adjustable Rate Mortgages. CHARM booklet. Consumer Handbook on Adjustable Rate Mortgages. And they're going to ask you, when would the borrower get the CHARM booklet? When they're getting an adjustable rate mortgage. The reason why that's important is because, like I said, 50% of this exam is all stories, scenarios. They're going to give you some stories and they're going to say, which one of these scenarios, in which one of these scenarios would the borrower get the CHARM booklet? Sue is getting a fixed rate loan. She wouldn't get the CHARM booklet. Danny is getting an interest-only loan. He wouldn't get the CHARM booklet. Mary is getting an adjustable rate mortgage and the rate is starting at this, that, and the other. She would get the CHARM booklet. Why? Because she's getting an adjustable rate mortgage. The CHARM stands for Consumer Handbook on Adjustable Rate Mortgages. And then another TILA disclosure is the when your home is on the line disclosure. When would they get that? The when your home is on the line disclosure. Excuse me. If they're getting a HELOC or a refi. Why? A HELOC, they're taking additional money out on their home. If you don't pay this, your home is on the line. You can lose it. A refinance, they're starting their loan all over again. So there's a booklet called When Your Home is on the Line. And if they're getting a HELOC or a refi, you have to give them this booklet so they can understand how HELOCs work and how refinances work. If they're not getting a HELOC or a refi, then they wouldn't get that particular disclosure. You need to know another word for APR is effective rate. They're going to ask you, what is another word for APR, effective rate? And there are two other words that they use for interest rate. They may call it the note rate and the nominal rate. Two other words that they use for interest rate, note rate and nominal rate. And you need to know the penalties for violating TILA. Pretty hefty. $5,000 a day if it was a single violation. $25,000 a day if it was a reckless violation. $1 million for violating TRID. That's these escrow companies that close before the 3-day waiting period. That's what they're risking. $1 million for violating TRID. Now I want to talk about the MDIA Act, Mortgage Disclosure Improvement Act, MDIA Act, and I want you to put on the top of this slide, just to remind yourself, still a part of TILA. The MDIA Act is still a part of TILA. MDIA stands for Mortgage Disclosure Improvement Act. Another name for the MDIA Act, they also refer to it as the 373 Rule. 373 Rule. This is what this law says. Initial disclosures are required within the first 3 days. We've been talking about that all morning. When are the initial disclosures required? Within the first 3 days. Then it goes on to say the soonest that a loan can close is 7 days after disclosures have been delivered or put in the mail. Now in California, we don't really close loans in 7 days, but this is a national exam. What is the soonest that a loan can close wherever it is? 7 days after disclosures have been delivered or put in the mail. And then if redisclosure is required, and when you hear the word redisclosure, you almost don't have to read anymore. Redisclosure always means 3 additional days. If redisclosure is required, then the borrower gets 3 additional days. That is the 373 rule. Redisclosure is generally required because the APR changes. Highlight here where I have 1/8 for a regular transaction, which just simply means a 30-year fix, or 1/4 for a irregular transaction, anything that's not a 30-year fix. If the rate goes up or down by more than 1/8 or 1/4, you have to redisclose. And the borrower gets 3 additional days to decide if they still want to do the loan. Here's a scenario or an example. You're doing a loan for me. You meet with me, we do all the initial pre-qualification, you pull my credit, you pre-qualify me, and you tell me my rate. I think we can get you, Artricia, at 4.5%. We can get you approved at 4.5%. So, do you agree? And I'm like, okay, sure. Continue. I'm good with that. At 4.5%, my payment is going to be $1,500. So you go off to Loan Land to try to find me a loan. I go back to work. You call me back 30, 40 days later when you found me a lender and you got me approved. And you call me and said, we got you approved. Meet me at 5 o'clock. I have the notary there. You can sign your docs and you can get in your house. We got your loan. I get there. But all the paperwork now says 6%. Well, when we first talked, you told me 4.5%, and now that the deal is done, you're telling me 6%. Yeah, that's the best we can do, but go ahead and sign. The good thing is we got you approved. You can't expect me to sign. You have to do what? Redisclose. Why? Because the rate changed by more than 1/8 or 1/4. So you have to give me all the paperwork again, redisclose, and I get what? 3 additional days to look it over and decide if that's something that I want to do. 373 rule. And redisclosure can only be waived in the case of what's called a bona fide financial emergency. Those are the words that you're looking for. Bona fide financial emergency. Here's an example of the question that I had with that. It says, in which of the following instances can redisclosure be waived? A, the house burned down. B, the borrower's dad died, she got to leave town. C, the cat died. D, bona fide financial emergency. You're looking for the words bona fide financial emergency. And then it's going to say who determines if it's a bona fide financial emergency. The lender. The lender. And the only time that I've seen where they've approved a bona fide financial emergency is because the house was going to go for foreclosure the very next day. So they did it. Other than that, it's really not going to happen. The reason why it's not going to happen is because what if I agreed to that and I didn't do the 3 days to think about it? My payment was going to be $1,500, but at the last minute, my rate changed to 6%. Now my payment is going to be $3,000. I didn't take the 3 days to think about it. I just signed it. A year later, I'm in foreclosure. And the lender says, well, what happened? You know, they're saying, well, why did you foreclose? Well, you know, that loan officer I deal with at the last minute, they changed everything on me. And this is what happened, and I couldn't make the payment. They want to be able to say, no, Artricia, the rate did change, but you had 3 days to think about it, and you still agreed to it. So it's not the lender's fault. It did change, but you had 3 days to think about it, and you still agreed to it. Got it? Now, bona fide financial emergency, and only the lender can determine if it's a bona fide financial emergency. You need to know the definition of a business day according to TILA. The definition of a business day according to TILA. All calendar days except for Sunday and legal holidays. A business day is any day, calendar day, except for Sunday and legal holidays. They're going to ask you what law says Saturday is a work day. TILA. TILA says Saturday is a work day. Why? Because a work day to TILA is any calendar day unless it's Sunday or legal holiday. Now, there's an exception to this rule. An exception to this rule. If they're talking about the loan estimate, the initial loan estimate. If the question asks about the initial loan estimate, meaning the very first one, the one that they get at or within 3 days of the application, the definition of a business day is any day that that bank is open for business. Any day that creditor is open for business. Maybe the creditor was open yesterday for Veterans Day or on Thanksgiving Day. So you have a lot of banks now that are in supermarkets, and they're open on Sundays. They're open on holidays. If the question asks about the initial loan estimate, that's a business day because they're open. So, if it's the initial loan estimate, it's any day that that particular bank is open for business. If it's anything else, a calendar day is any day except for Sunday and legal holiday. Now, I also want you guys to write down and make sure you understand the difference between a business day and a calendar day. How do you know something is a business day or a calendar day? If it's 0 to 9, let me explain it. If it's 0 to 9, single digits, it's always going to be a business day. 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day. All the way up to 9, whether they say it or not, it's a business day in the finance world. If it's 10 and over, meaning double digits, then it's going to be a calendar day. If they just said 14 days, is that business or calendar? Well, that's 10 and over, so that's going to be what? Calendar. They just said 4 days. What is that? Business. So if it's 0 to 9 days, it's going to be a what? Business day. If it's 10 and over, it's going to be a calendar day. Says who? Tilla. Now, I told you that Tilla also mandates advertising. Tilla also deals with advertising, credit, APR, and advertising of loans. We're going to talk about the advertising part of Tilla now. You have to be able to recognize when something is a triggering term. A triggering term means if they use this term, it triggers additional things that they have to say. Have you ever listened to a radio commercial or a TV commercial? They're talking really slow, then all of a sudden, because the attorney comes on and has to give a legal ease. It's because they said something that was triggering. It triggered that they had to say something else. Or you see a really nice flyer, and then all of a sudden at the bottom it has this little bitty writing in here, disclaimers, because they said something that was triggering. You have to understand what a triggering term is because they're going to test you on that. I'm going to give you my definition of a triggering term. You can write it down if you like, and then we'll go over what they have here. This is what a triggering term is. If they use a number, to describe credit terms, and that number is not the APR, then it triggers. Again, if they use a number to describe credit terms, and that number is not the APR, then it triggers. But if they use the APR, they don't have to say anything else. So, look at the boxes I have here. One is triggering terms. Look, they're using numbers to describe credit. 20% down. That triggers, not enough information. $700 a month. That triggers. 360. Well, all of those quoting interest rates without giving the APR. Those are all triggering terms. That's not enough. You have to give more information. But look at those in the second box. They gave the APR or they use generic terms. Those are okay on advertising. When I say it triggers, what do I mean when it triggers? It has to now give you the amount of the percentage, the terms, the annual percentage rate. The number one thing that a lot of loan originators do to violate this law is we quote interest rates without giving the APR. I wear a shirt that says, I am a mortgage broker. People tap me at the grocery store. What's the rates today? And I said, oh, about 4.5%. What law did I just break? I just violated Tilla because I gave her the interest rate. I used a number without giving the APR. But if I would have said, oh, the APR today is about blank, she would have been like, oh, I don't want to know the APR. I want to know the interest rate. Well, then I have to explain to her what APR is and things of that nature, and I'm trying to get out of the store with some milk or whatever. But that's how it goes. You are not supposed to quote rates or any of these things without also giving them the information for number 1, number 2, and number 3. But if you give them the APR, you don't have to say anything else until they come in and do a complete application with you. If you use any of these generic terms, you don't have to say anything else until they actually come in. You don't want to spend all your time, your voice, your resources explaining when they're not serious yet. But if you're advertising, you cannot use triggering terms unless you also give them the APR. Where do you find the APR? It's published every Monday with FreddieMac.com, or just Google it. Just Google it. 100%, why doesn't that count? It's a number, but it doesn't leave anything to the imagination. It's a whole. Okay. What's your question?
How about 0% down payment?
0% wouldn't count either. Okay, but because there's nothing in there, it's not really a number. Now, this next one, qualified mortgages. Qualified mortgages. Make yourself a note on this slide. Still a part of TILA. Remember I told you TILA was what? The Godzilla. So all of this is still TILA. Qualified mortgages. People confuse that because they think it has to do with whether or not the borrower qualifies for a mortgage. It has nothing to do with the borrower at all. It has to do with whether or not the lender qualifies for what's called safe harbor. Highlight where it says safe harbor. I call it government bailout money. So qualified mortgage, either a mortgage qualifies the lender for safe harbor, meaning the bailout money, or it doesn't qualify them for safe harbor. What they're telling lenders is, we're going to make it a little bit harder for people to get loans, but if they get a loan based on this qualification and they still go into foreclosure, if you issue this loan as a qualified mortgage and your borrower still defaults, because you did what we said, we'll give you back all the money you lost on it. For example, Artricia applies for a loan. The first thing they're going to do is say, oh my God, let me see if Artricia fits as a qualified mortgage. Because if Artricia goes into default, we don't care. The government's going to give us back any money we lost on Artricia. Oh, Artricia doesn't qualify because she doesn't meet these criteria. Well, we're Bank of America. What can we do for Artricia? Whenever you turn in a loan nowadays, the first thing the bank is going to do is see if they fit into qualified mortgage, because it's like a no-brainer. It's a guarantee. If they fit into here and they go into default, they don't care. They're going to get their money back. But what if they don't fit? Then they're going to do whatever they would have been doing in the first place. You have to know what makes a mortgage a qualified mortgage or a non-qualified mortgage. And it's an all or nothing thing. If any one of these items are off, then it's not a qualified mortgage. Either they fit into the box all the way or they don't. So let's go over what makes a mortgage a qualified mortgage. The point is, a lot of people got mortgages that shouldn't have gotten them. They couldn't even prove that they actually had the ability to repay them. So they're making it harder. Okay? So the first thing is no doc loans and NINA loans. NINA stands for no income, no assets. Those are not allowed. They want the borrower to go full doc. They're not doing stated or NINA or not for this guarantee. They want the borrower to be able, you have to actually qualify for a loan now. When I got my first house, they stated my income. I didn't make that much. They stated my income. Okay? But now you can't do that. You have to actually be able to prove the income. So no doc and NINA loans are not allowed. The other thing is, I'm not saying you can't get a loan that way. I'm just saying they're not going to guarantee that loan and get bailout money. The second one is the back-end ratio cannot be higher than 43%. That's pretty tough. Over 50% of my money go to my mortgages, so I wouldn't fit this. But in order for this mortgage to qualify for safe harbor, no more than 43% of their debt can go toward the maximum DTI is 43%. The loan originator can't be charging more than 3 points. Not for this guarantee. The loan term cannot be over 30 years. It can be under. I did a 40-year loan about 4 or 5 months ago. Fine. Just not part of this guarantee. They don't want interest only. They don't want negative AM. They don't want prepayment penalties. They're trying to get us back to 30-year fix, 30-year fix, 30-year fix. The norm. So this is how that would go. Which of the following is a qualified mortgage? Which of the following is not a qualified mortgage? Sue got a loan. It's a 30-year fixed. She was able to go full doc. Her back-end ratio was 45%. No. David got a loan. His ratio was 40%. The loan originator charged 2.5 points. It was for 15 years, and he went full doc. Yes. Yes. See what I'm saying? All or nothing. So this page is very important. Put a circle or X around it because you will probably get at least 7 or 8 just on qualified mortgages because this topic is so new and because you have to know it. And because any one thing can throw it all off. They tell you everything, but then they put a prepayment penalty. Well, now it's all off. So you have to know all of these things. You also have to know all of these on the next page, what they call ATR, ability to repay. What are the 8 things that the lender must look at to make sure that the borrower actually has the ATR, the ability to repay? Well, these are the 8 items that they have to look at. They are now making lenders buy back loans if they can't prove that the borrower should have got the loan in the first place. I have a friend that's an investor, a mortgage banker. She did a loan. They made her buy back a $300,000 loan. Why? Because that borrower defaulted, went into foreclosure, and when they went back to check the file and they went back to her, they said, show us that you proof of why you gave them this loan. Show us where you looked at these 8 things. She didn't have proof of all of it. So she had to buy back that $300,000 loan. You need to know what are the 8 things that a lender must look at and verify before they can give the person a loan. They have to actually make sure that the borrower actually has the ability to repay the loan. They're going to say, which of the following is one of the things they must look at? Which of the following is not? If you know all 8 things, they can't trick you.
Makes you buy back the loan.
The lender. You have to buy back from the lender. Not you as the individual, but that particular, whoever funded it. Whoever got paid for it, the bank. HOPA loans. We're still on TILA. HOPA loans. You need to understand the term APOR. APOR stands for Average Prime Offer Rate. APOR. All it really means are, what are the average rates today? And that's going to help you determine if a loan is a Section 32 or if a loan is a Section 35. Highlight there where it says 6.5 and 8.5. Those are the triggers that will make a loan a Section 32. And then highlight what I have at the bottom, the 1.5, 2.5, and 3.5. Those are the triggers that will make the loan a Section 35. But it's all based on the APOR. On the exam, they will always tell you what the APOR is, the average rates. So I can ask you, hey, what's the APOR today? Or I can say, hey, what's the average rates today? It's the same thing, so don't get caught up in that terminology. But this is how the question will go. The APOR today is 4%. Danny applied for a loan with cash call, and they approved him, but at 26%. Is it a Section 32 or is it a Section 35? It would be a Section 32 because it exceeded the APOR by more than the 6.5 and 8.5. Okay, because remember, they're all hard money loans. We had a guy that came in the other day, and he brought his paperwork from one of these type of loans. He got an email that says, you've been approved for $10,000. We will wire $10,000 in your bank account in 10 minutes. You've been approved for $10,000, internet loan. So he applied. He got approved for $10,000 in 10 minutes. All we need you to do is download these disclosures, HOPA disclosures, sign them, and send them back. And we'll wire the $10,000 into your account. So he printed them out and he brought them to class. The APOR was something like 31%. Do you really want $10,000 that bad? Would that have been a 32 or a 35? That would be a 32. It would exceed whatever the average is by way more than 6.5 or 8.5. But if it only exceeded by these smaller numbers, then it would be a Section 35. Remember, HOPA loans are all hard money loans, but it's based on the APOR. The tests always have to give you the APOR, and they'll say, but your borrower is getting this. Is it a 32 or is it a 35? Okay, so the next section that we're going to talk about is ECOA, but before we do, we're going to take another break here. ECOA. We're on ECOA, the Equal Credit Opportunities Act. Now, I get this question almost every week. Artricia, you told me ECOA was about discrimination, but I read something that said fair housing was about discrimination. Did you make a mistake? Which one of these laws deal with discrimination? And the answer is both. Both. ECOA is about discrimination with a credit application. Fair housing is about discrimination in the sale and lease of property. So you need to read the whole scenario. Or they talk about someone discriminating with a credit application, then it's ECOA. Are they talking about someone discriminating in selling or leasing a property? Then they're talking about fair housing. But both are about discrimination. Do you get that? So ECOA is about discrimination with a credit application. Any question about a credit application is going to be under ECOA, the Equal Credit Opportunities Act. And ECOA is Regulation B. The regulators must be equal when extending credit. They can't discriminate because I'm female and you're male, or I'm black and you're Latino, or I'm Muslim and you're Catholic. They have to be equal. ECOA is the Equal Credit Opportunities Act. It's so that everyone has an equal chance to obtain credit. Now, if you apply for credit, how long do they have to give you an answer on a credit application? 30 days. How long do you have to get an answer on a credit application? 30 days. If the application is a denial, it could be called an adverse action notice. That's just a fancy word for no. Adverse action notice. So how long do they have to give you an adverse action notice? 30 days. You need to know what a protected class is. A protected class is a class of individuals. They cannot use this as the reason on why they're saying yes or no. It's a protected class. You need to know what the protected classes are. Well, there are 8 protected classes under ECOA. 8. Sex, race, religion, color, and national origin, the ones I have here in the black, are also protected by Fair Housing Act. So circle those and make yourself a note that sex, race, religion, color, national origin are also protected by the Fair Housing Act. But age, marital status, and public assistance, these that I have here in the red, are only protected by ECOA. They're going to ask you what's protected by Fair Housing and ECOA? Those first 5. What's only protected by ECOA? Age, marital status, and receipt of public assistance. You're going to have to know that. Now, what do I mean when I say protected class? I mean that they cannot use this as the reason why they're denying you. Well, sex. Well, you're female. We don't give loans to females. They can't say that. That's a protected class. Well, you're Muslim, or you're black, or you're from this country. They cannot use those as the reasons on why they're denying you. Those are what's called protected classes. Their decision can't be made on those. Under ECOA, you also have age. They can't use that as the reason. Well, we denied you because you're 92 and you want us to give you a loan for a Maserati. They cannot deny you because of your age. We denied you because you're only 21 and this house is a 4-bedroom, 5-bathroom. So they cannot deny you because of your age. They also cannot deny you because of your marital status or by what's called receipt of public assistance. Receipt of public assistance. You need to know what public assistance means because people want to think it just means welfare, but it doesn't. It means Social Security, disability, child support, alimony, all of those. They cannot deny you because you get what's called public assistance. But you need to understand what public assistance means. So they can't say, we're denying you because only income you get is Social Security. They can't deny you because your income is Social Security. Or we're denying you because your income is child support. They can't do that. You can have like 9 different baby daddies and you have a whole bunch of child support. So they can't say it's because it's child support or alimony. Well, you don't really work. All you do is get alimony. They cannot deny you because of your receipt of public assistance. So you need to know what's considered public assistance. All non-taxable income. So some examples are Social Security, disability, child support, alimony, foster care income, pension income, retirement income. This is what I want you to write here. Under ECOA, you cannot be denied or they cannot deny you based on your source of income. Under ECOA, they cannot deny you based on your source of income, meaning where it's coming from. However, they can deny you based on your amount of income. So I'm going to say that again. under ECOA, they cannot deny you based on your source of income. However, they can deny you based on your amount of income. We're not denying you, Artricia, because you get child support. We're just saying that the amount that you get is not enough. We're not denying you because it's Social Security. It's just you don't get enough Social Security income to qualify for this house, this car, this boat, whatever you're trying to get. So they cannot deny you based on the source, but they can deny you based on the amount. That's all that's saying. Under ECOA, the only correct way to ask about marital status is, are you married, unmarried, or separated? What law did you violate if you ask a person if they're single? ECOA. If they're widowed, if they're divorced, you cannot say those. You cannot go around, if you're doing a loan application, asking a person if they're single. You can do that in a nightclub, but you can't do that if you're doing a loan application. You cannot say, are you single? Are you widowed? Are you divorced? You have to say, are you married, unmarried, or separated? That's the only correct way to ask about marital status. Says who? ECOA, Regulation B. That's just the rule. Again, under ECOA, you can't consider age. You just have to make sure they're at least 18, or if they're applying for a reverse mortgage, if they're at least 62. ECOA records must be kept for how long? 25 months. Who would have known that had you not taken a class? They're going to say on the test, how long must ECOA records be kept? 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, 25 months. Who'd actually pick 25 months? But now you know. ECOA records must be kept for 25 months. That's why I tell people that come to me that says, oh, I've been a broker for years, I should be able to pass this test. You wouldn't know that. You wouldn't know that. ECOA records must be kept for 25 months. Why? Because a person has up to 24 months to sue under ECOA. So the records will still be there. So how long, pay attention to the question. How long does a person have to sue for ECOA violation? 24 months. How long must ECOA records be kept? 25 months. Says who? ECOA. The penalty for violating ECOA, $10,000. If an application for credit, don't matter if it's credit for a house, car, boat, if an application for credit is denied based on the appraisal, the borrower has 90 days to request a copy of the appraisal, and when they do, the lender has 30 days to deliver it. If it's denied, the borrower has 90 days to request a copy of the appraisal, and when they do, the lender has 30 days to deliver it. But what if it's not denied? What if it's approved? They get it 3 days prior to doc signing. 3 days prior to doc signing. So pay attention to the question. What did they ask? Did they ask if it was denied? When did they get it? Or did they ask if it was approved? Because there's a difference. Fair Housing Act. So ECOA was about discrimination in granting credit, a credit application. Fair housing is also about discrimination, but it's about discrimination in the sale and lease of property. Fair housing has 7 protected classes. The first 5, sex, race, religion, color, national origin, circle those. They're also protected by ECOA. The last 2 are only protected by the Fair Housing Act. Disability, you can't deny selling or leasing me this property because I'm in a wheelchair, because I have a hearing aid, because I have some kind of a disability. You cannot use that as the reason on why you're denying me. Or because of familiar status. Familiar status, write this down. Anything having to do with children. Familiar status means anything having to do with children. The question you'll get more than likely is someone that's denying a person because she's pregnant. We don't want to rent you this room on the 3rd floor because you're 6 months pregnant, and we don't feel comfortable with that. What law did they just violate? The Fair Housing Act. Now, there are 3 laws that come under the Fair Housing Act, and you need to remember that they come under the Fair Housing Act. Blockbusting, steering, and redlining are all a part of the Fair Housing Act. Blockbusting, steering, and redlining are all a part of the Fair Housing Act. Now, blockbusting, trying to induce an owner to sell their home by saying that another ethnicity is moving in the neighborhood and now your values are going to change. You might want to think about selling. Didn't you notice there was a Black, a Latino, or Asian just moved in your neighborhood? Here's my card. Your values are probably going to go down there. Call me. You might want to think about selling. Another word for blockbusting is panic selling. Trying to panic someone into selling their house by saying because another ethnicity just moved in the neighborhood, your value is probably going to go down. So you might want to think about selling now. Blockbusting, panic selling. Steering is just the opposite of that. Trying to get them to buy in a particular neighborhood, but based on their race, religion, or ethnicity. So, you're Armenian, so we should probably start in Glendale, right? Or you're Latino, we should start in East LA. Or you're Muslim, we should start over here. You can't do that. You can't use their race, religion, or ethnicity to determine where you're going to show them a home. You're steering them based on their race, religion, or ethnicity. Now, they can steer themselves. My sister-in-law, you guys saw my little nephew, she's Filipino. She said, I only want to live in La Palma. Don't show me anything but La Palma. I can read the signs. There's a lot of Filipino people there. I can feel comfortable. If it's not La Palma, don't show it to me. She steered herself. But I couldn't have said, okay, girl, we're going to find you a house. Now, you know you're Filipino, right? So we got to stay over here. That would be wrong. That would be me steering her based on her, race, religion, or ethnicity. Sometimes you get clients that say, show me an area that's predominantly blank. Or show me an area that's predominantly blank. That's fine if they do it. You can't just look at them and say, okay, I have a Latino client coming in, so I should probably get ready to go over here. Or I have a Black person coming in. You can't do that. Got it? They're going to ask you who commits the discriminatory practice of blockbusting and steering. Who does that? The answer is real estate agents. And then you have redlining, refusing to make loans for any discriminatory reason. Who does redlining? The answer is a lender. Blockbusting and steering, real estate agents, redlining, a lender. And also make yourself a note. Redlining is the law that led to the creation of HMDA. What law led to the creation of the HMDA law? Redlining is the law or the reason why we have HMDA, Regulation C. How long does a person have to sue under the Fair Housing Act? 1 year. How long do they have under ECOA? 2 years. How long do they have under Fair Housing? 1 year. Make sure you keep it straight. This logo, look at this little house. Equal housing opportunity. They're going to ask you what law requires that that logo be on all advertising. And what people do is they say, oh, this logo, the equal housing opportunity, ECOA, that's so wrong. That's the Fair Housing logo. So don't get it wrong. People look at that word equal and they go straight to ECOA. That's what they want you to do. If they trick you enough, you get to give them another $110. Okay? It's called the Equal Housing Opportunity logo, but it's required by what law? The Fair Housing Act. HIPAA, Homeowners Protection Act, HIPAA. This is where people want to teach me the class, and I need to make sure that you understand it. Let me teach the class. HIPAA is all about when PMI can be canceled. But teacher, PMI can never be canceled. You're talking about MIP with FHA loans. That's not what we're on. I'm talking about PMI. HIPAA is about when PMI can be canceled. So PMI stands for the Homeowners Protection Act. PMI can be canceled. The bar can request. You need to know two things. When can the bar request that the PMI be canceled? When the loan when the loan LTV has reached 80%. So the bar can request PMI cancellation at 80% LTV, loan to value. If the loan has been paid down by 20% and they only owe 80%, the bar can contact the lender and says, hey, can you consider removing the PMI? The lender can say yes or no. But the question on the exam is, at what point, and let's just keep it to what you need to know for the exam, at what point can the borrower request cancellation of PMI? When the loan reaches 80% LTV, or they can say when the loan has been paid down by how much? 20%. Because they pay it down by 20%, what's left? 80. And the borrower can request. And the lender can say yes or the lender can say no. Then the next question is, at what point must the lender automatically, meaning they must do it, they can't say no, cancel the PMI when the loan is at 78% LTV? They don't have a choice. They have to do it, which means it's been paid down by 22%. So they have a choice at 80. They can say, no, we've seen that you've been late a few times. We don't want to take it off. But at 78%, they have to remove the PMI. They may require an appraisal or some other things. That's not the question. The question is, at what point must the lender, at what point can the borrower request it? 80. At what point must the lender do it? 78. Okay? They may ask it in an opposite way. If it's been paid down by 20%, what's left? 80. If it's been paid down by 22%, what's left? 78. Just answer the question the way that it needs to be answered to pass the test.
Is private mortgage insurance a buzzword for conventional?
Mm-mm.
Oh no. If it's what if the market does not allow?
That's not the question. I'm just trying to show you how to pass the test. Got it?
Okay.
When can the borrower request cancellation of PMI? When the LTV is 80%. When must the lender cancel the PMI? When the loan is at 78%. That's all I'm going to talk about. Okay? HMDA, Regulation C, HMDA, Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, HMDA, Regulation C, allows the lenders to see where possible discrimination takes place. What law lets the lender see where possible discrimination takes place? HMDA, Regulation C. It requires lenders to file monthly, highlight monthly, because they're going to ask you how often, monthly, quarterly, annually. HMDA requires lenders to file monthly reports. These reports are called LARs, highlight that as well. Loan activity registers. Monthly reports that detail the ethnicity, sex, and race of anyone that applies for a loan. They're going to say what law requires lenders to file a monthly report regarding the race, ethnicity, and sex of anyone that applies for a loan with them. HMDA, Regulation C's. What is that report called? Loan Activity Register. This is Section 10 of the 1003. This is what it looks like. This is the HMDA section. This section is also called the Government Monitoring Section. So they may say Section 10, or they may say the Government Monitoring Section. Make sure you know it both ways. FACRA. Now, FACRA is about a credit report. So I told you, Regulation B, you want to have a very good credit report. Make sure you make this distinction. ECOA is about a credit application. FACRA is about a credit report. Don't get it mixed up. ECOA is about a credit application. FACRA is about a credit report. So FACRA, Fair Credit Reporting Act, is about credit reports and credit reporting agencies. What are credit reporting agencies? Equifax, TransUnion, Experian. Those are credit reporting agencies. And FACRA talks about what they can and cannot do. Okay, what they can and cannot do. According to FACRA, a borrower has 5 rights. Okay, the first one, they have a right to an adverse action notice, simply a denial letter. You have a right to get it in writing. What law says you have a right to get it in writing? They can't just call and say, yeah, Tricia, we looked at it. Nah, we don't think that's going to work. They have to give it to me in writing and explain the reason in case I want to dispute it. What law says they have to give it to me in writing? FACRA. It also says I have a right to a credit report. Now, they may call it a credit file. Don't get all crazy and mixed up because they didn't say credit report. They said credit file. Same thing. What law says you have a right to get a copy of your credit file? FACRA. It also says you have a right to get a copy of your credit score, but the credit score is not free. Make sure you get that. You have a right to request a copy of your credit score, but they don't have to give it to you for free. Your report, they have to give it to you for free. But if they want to charge you for the score, they can. Here is the question. What law says you have a right to get a free copy of your credit score? What law says you have a right to receive a free copy of your credit score? There isn't one. There is no law. Now, some people say, well, I can get a free copy of my credit score. This company gives it. That's fine. But that wasn't the question. The question says, what law says they have to give you a free copy of your credit score? There isn't one. There's a law that says they have to give you a free copy of your credit report, but there is not a law that says they have to give you a free copy of your credit score. So keep that straight. Okay? What law says that if you can dispute incomplete or inaccurate information, you look at your credit report, you be like, I wasn't late, or this isn't me, or I didn't make this inquiry. What law will let you dispute that? FACRA. FACRA. And limit pre-screen offers. What law allows you to limit pre-screen offers? FACRA. These are the 5 rights that you have under FACRA that they'll test you on. Now, FACRA says that any organization or company that denies you, and they said it's based on your credit report, they have to give you the name, address, and phone number of what credit reporting agency they use. If you ever apply for a car or jury or something, they say, we denied you. We use Equifax. Here's their name, address, and phone number. Whenever you get denied, they have to give you the name, address, and phone number of what credit reporting agency they use so that you can contact them and see what's going on your credit report. What law says they have to do that? FACRA. FACRA says you can get a free copy of your credit report if. Circle the if, because there's one law that says we'll give you a free copy of your credit report if. But there's another law that says you don't need a reason, we'll give it to you once a year. You need to know which one has the if. That's FACRA. We will give it to you under FACRA if. And then there's another law we'll talk about in a minute that says you don't need a reason, you can get it once a year. FACRA has the if. You can get a free copy of your credit report under FACRA if you got denied and have a denial letter, if you've been the victim of identity theft, if you've been the victim of fraud, if you're on public assistance, Social Security, disability, child support, or if you're unemployed. You can write them and say, I'm unemployed. And because what happens is, now sometimes employers want to look at your credit report, your Facebook page, your Instagram, everything before they hire you. So FACRA allows you to get a free copy of your credit report if you're unemployed. And they're not going to charge you for that. Why? You don't have a job. So you can just write it says, I'm unemployed, seeking employment, and under FACRA, I'd like to receive a free copy of my credit report. You might want to see what's on there before an potential employer looks at it. Got it? Now, FACRA also says negative information can stay on your credit report for 7 years. Late payments or any of those things. Negative information. How long does it stay on your credit report? 7 years. Bankruptcies, doesn't matter what chapter it is. A bankruptcy can stay on your credit report for how long? 10 years. Unpaid, underline the word unpaid tax liens stay on your credit report forever. Unpaid. But if it's a paid tax lien, it's considered negative information and it stays for 7 years. So you really have to make sure you're paying attention. Did they say paid tax lien or unpaid tax lien? It's going to make a difference. And they're thinking that that's going to go over your head. So if it's unpaid, it's going to stay on there. A lot of people say, oh, I got an unpaid tax lien, I'm going to let it sit there for 7 years and it'll go away. It's never going to go away if it's unpaid. But if it's a paid tax lien, it's going to show paid, but it's still going to stay there for 7 years before it goes away. Criminal convictions, some states put criminal convictions. California they don't, but some East Coast states put criminal convictions. If that goes on your credit report, it will stay on there forever. Must limit access to credit report only to those with a legitimate business need. They're going to give you some scenarios and say which one of these situations would allow or would be okay for someone to pull someone's credit report. Because what's going on is loan originators, you'll be able to have access to pull someone's credit report, and all your friends, family, whatever will come to you and say, can you put my credit? I'm getting ready to buy a car and I want to see what's on it. Can you put you're not supposed to do that. You're not even supposed to give a person a copy of their credit report. You can only have access or pull someone's credit report if you have a legitimate business need. So they're going to give you scenarios and you're going to have to determine which one is a legitimate business need to pull someone's credit. For example, my daughter just moved to Frisco and she moved with her boyfriend, fiance. I wanted to pull his credit so bad to see if but that wouldn't be a legitimate business need. Okay, or my neighbor, they just got a new boat and a car. I know their information. Let me see I couldn't do that. Okay, or my employee, she just got she just got a new car. I know I don't pay her enough for that. Let me pull her. I can't do that. But if someone's applying for a loan with me or insurance with me, that would be a legitimate business need. Do you get it? You can only pull their credit if you have a legitimate business need. If not, what law are you violating? FACRA. FACT Act. Now, FACT Act came under FACRA, just so you know. FACRA came first, but it wasn't enough. Then we started having a problem with identity theft. So FACRA was amended to include the FACT Act. The FACT Act. So if they ask you what came first, FACRA, then the FACT Act. FACT Act is the Fair and Accurate Credit Transaction Act. FACT Act. And it's all about identity theft. What law deals with identity theft? The FACT Act. It has a section of rules called Section 114 rules. What's another name for Section 114 rules? Identity theft rules. It's a set of rules that if the lender sees this or a creditor sees this, they should probably do a little bit more checking into it. One of the rules says that they have to verify the validity of any change of address. What does that mean? Verify the validity of any change of address. So say this is American Express and they get a call that says, hey, this is Artricia. You know what? I lost my American Express card. Can you send me a new one? Oh, sure. We'll send you one right away. Oh, I moved. Let me give you my new address. Send my new credit card to this new address. They still have to say, sure, right away. But then when they get off the phone, they have to verify the validity of that. Try to call me back at a number that I have on record, or text me, or send me a letter that says, hey, did you just order a new card? Was this really you? Because that's a red flag. They're supposed to check on it. They're not supposed to just send it out. What if that really wasn't me? So the question on the exam is, what law says that they must verify the validity of any change of address? Section 114 rules of the FACT Act. They have to verify the validity. This law also says you can get a free copy of your credit report once a year. No if needed. Remember, FACRA, you can only get a free copy of your credit report if one of these reasons exists. Number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. If it's not one of those reasons, you can't get a free copy of your credit report under FACRA. Find another law to get it under. Okay? But under FACT Act, you don't have to have a reason. You can get it once a year. No if needed. You have to know what law has the if, which one has the no if. FACRA, they want you to check it. You don't want to go 5 years and find out somebody's been stealing your identity. So they suggest that you check it once a year to make sure everything is on the up and up. The site that they want you to use is annualcreditreport.com. That is the one that's backed by the government, annualcreditreport.com. But they will try to trick you. This is how that question goes. Once a year, you can get a free copy of your credit report. So every year, you should get a free copy of your credit report. What site do you go to get a free copy of your credit report? Then they have their A, B, C, D. And A says freecreditreport.com. And you're thinking, free. No, they're trying to trick you. Annualcreditreport.com. That's the only one that's backed by the government. Now, under the FACT Act, you have the following rights. Businesses must truncate, highlight that word, truncate debit and credit card information. What does that mean? That means that they have to shorten it. They have to put XXXX in just the last 4 to 5 digits. They can't put your whole credit card number on the receipt. What if you go to Home Depot, use your credit card, you walk out and it blows in the wind? Now someone will have your whole credit card number. No, they won't, because it has to be truncated. It will be X, 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 X in just the last 4 or 5 digits. What law says they have to do that? The FACT Act. Also, what law allows you to place a credit freeze, or you can write there in parentheses, or a password on your credit report? The FACT Act. You can freeze your credit where they have to ask you each and every time, or put a password. If someone doesn't know your password, they can't access your credit. Or requires measures for you to secure and dispose of sensitive information. Under secure and dispose, I want you to put burn, shred, or keep it locked. What law says that you either have to burn it, shred it, or keep it locked? Just because you're done with that client's file and you got paid your commission, you can't just take it and throw it in the trash can. Somebody can get it out. You either have to burn the information, shred it, or keep it somewhere locked to prevent identity theft. A question that you get here a lot is, what law did the loan originator violate when they went to lunch and just left all the client's file on the desk? You're thinking, well, I'm going to lunch, I'm coming right back, but you can't just leave the information out. You have to lock it up. Other than that, you're violating the FACT Act. People do it all the time, but what law are they breaking when they do that? The FACT Act. Graham-Leach-Bliley Act. We talked a lot about that this morning. Graham-Leach-Bliley Act. You need to know what another name for the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act is. It's the Financial Services Modernization Act. Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, another name for it is the Financial Services Modernization Act. And it has 3 laws or 3 policies. SPF, Safeguarding, Pretexting, and Financial Privacy. Safeguarding, Pretexting, Financial Privacy. We talked about safeguarding. Requires financial institutions to have a policy on how they're going to keep our information safe. I had you guys write that down earlier. Pretexting policy, a policy to keep people from getting into your information under false pretenses, pretending to being you and signing into your accounts. Financial privacy governs the collection of non-public information. And I told you that's the one that allows you to either opt in or opt out of having your personal information shared. You need to know the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act has what? SPF, Safeguarding, Pretexting, Financial Privacy. Then the USA Patriot Act. The USA Patriot Act, brought about because of 9/11, requires companies to establish an anti-money laundering program. But this is what I want you to remember. Lenders are required to verify date of birth, social security, and ethnicity of anyone applying for a loan. What law requires that lenders verify date of birth, social security, and ethnicity of anyone getting a loan in the United States? The Patriot Act. The DNC list, do not call list, DNC list. If you are a loan originator and you're buying leads or getting leads, or you go to work for a company and they give you a list of people to call to solicit business, that essentially turns you into what's called a telemarketer. And what you're supposed to do under the do not call list is, before you call anyone on that list, you're supposed to go to the internet to donotcall.gov and search the internet's do not call list to see if any of those people are on the do not call list. Now, no one actually does this, but that's what's supposed to happen. The question on the exam is, because when you get hired at a company, the first thing they do is, you're the low person on the totem call. Here's a few leads. Sit down and call these people and see if you can get any business. Before you call those people, what are you supposed to do? Search the do not call list to see if they're on the do not call list. How often, this is the question, how often must a loan originator or telemarketer search the do not call list and remove the names of people that are on there before they call them? Every 31 days. Every 31 days. Now, there are 2 lists that you need to be concerned with. The national list, donotcall.gov, and each company is supposed to keep their own internal list. They may call it an internal list, a company list, a branch list. you need to know how often must those lists be updated. The national list is updated every 90 days, meaning every 3 months. The do not call national list, the one on the internet, is updated every 3 months, meaning every 90 days. But if you are a company, which you're supposed to have a do not call list, or a branch or a bank, how often must you update your list and pass it back out to your employees? Every 30 days. The penalty for violating the do not call list is $16,000 per incident. What is the penalty for violating the do not call list? $16,000. Now listen to this question, because this is another way that they trick people. Anna called someone on the do not call list twice. What is the maximum she can be fined? 32. Anna called someone on the do not call list twice. What is the maximum she can be fined? 32. The next question is, Anna called someone on the do not call list twice. What is the maximum per incident that she can be charged? See how they try to trick you? They said per incident. So again, you have to pay attention to the different ways that they're trying to trick you. If they trick you enough, another $110 for them. Got it? Now, there's something called an EBR, Established Business Relationship. EBR. And if you have an EBR with someone, meaning you did business with them, even though they're on the do not call list, you can call them. But for how long? That's what you need to know. So, if someone is on the do not call list and you closed business with them, you closed a loan, you can call them for 18 months. But they're on the do not call list. That's fine, because you just did a deal with them and it closed. You can call them for 18 months. But what if your deal didn't close? It was just an application or an inquiry. You can only call them for 3 months. But what if they say stop calling? You have to stop calling. Do you got it? So they're going to ask you a really tricky question. Dana is on the do not call list. You just closed a deal with Dana. It went through just fine. But Dana's on the do not call list. But Dana says stop calling me. How often can you call him? You can't. You can't say, well, Dana, I just closed a deal with you, so I can call you for 18 months whether you like it or not. You can't do that, okay? Got it? Now, you need to know about MARS. Not the planet, but the law. MARS. Mortgage Assistance Relief Service Rules, MARS. It's all about loan mod, short sale, and foreclosure scams. It's the law that deals with loan mod, foreclosure, and short sale scams. There was a lot of that going on. Right, Nellie? We did that back in the day. Now, this law bans the collection of fees until the homeowner receives an offer. What was going on with all these loan mods and everything is that they were taking money up front and never even getting the people loan mods. So this law says no. Until you get them a loan mod and they accept it, you can't take any money. So what law bans the collection of fees on loan mods until they received an offer? Not just received an offer, but accepted it? MARS. Also prohibits from advising the consumer to not talk to their lenders. That's another thing. Don't answer the phone when the lender calls. Just let us know they called and we'll deal with it. What law says you cannot tell your borrower not to speak with their lender? MARS. Because if you do that, you can be fined $11,000. What was going on is they were telling the borrowers not to talk to the lender, and then they weren't talking to the lender. No one spoke to the lender, so the lender foreclosed. What law says you can't do that? MARS. And then you have the Bank Secrecy Act. Another name for the Bank Secrecy Act is the Anti-Money Laundering Act. Two names for the same law. The BSA, Bank Secrecy Act, and the AML, Anti-Money Laundering Act. It's all about money laundering. Anytime you are depositing, withdrawing, or transporting more than $10,000 cash, you go on the list. Doesn't mean you did anything wrong, but they keep track of that for terrorism purposes and things of that nature, and also for money laundering. I'm not sure if you guys know, and I tell you people about this, about Abby Lee Miller, Dance Mom, that reality show. She took the kids. It's a reality show where they dance and all this stuff. She took them overseas, got paid $40,000 cash for their show. She didn't, when you go to the airport, they give you this little form. Are you transporting more than $10,000 cash? She said no. She got paid $40,000 cash. She put it in 4 kids' backpack, $10,000 each, tried to come through the airport. Of course, the people saw it. They asked the kids, whose money is this? They all pointed to her. She's in jail right now in Victorville for violating the Anti-Money Laundering Act. She got sentenced to a year. All she had to do was say yes. That's dangerous. What if somebody else knew that she had that cash and they tried to hijack the plane? Anytime you are depositing, withdrawing, or transporting more than $10,000 cash, it goes on the list. They just need to know what's going on. Who says so? The BSA or the AML. And that's the end of the federal review. Ladies? Ladies? Non-traditional mortgages. Non-traditional mortgages. Gets a little bit easier after this part, where we're done up with the hard part, the federal part. So this stuff is either stuff you want to know, or you probably know it a little bit because you're a little bit in the industry. It's a lot of terms, definition, things you need to know. So it goes a little bit easier the rest of the class. Non-traditional mortgages. The definition of a non-traditional mortgage. According to the SAFE Act, because they're going to ask you according to what law? According to the SAFE Act, the definition of a non-traditional mortgage is anything, highlight anything, other than a 30-year fix. So if a non-traditional mortgage is anything other than a 30-year fix, what does that make a traditional mortgage? A 30-year fixed. That's what they want you to know. There's 2 categories, 2 boxes. One box says traditional. One box says non-traditional. Traditional, 30-year fix. Non-traditional, any and everything else. According to who? The SAFE Act. Doesn't mean good or bad. It just means traditional, 30-year fix. Non-traditional, anything else, any other kind of mortgage. They're trying to get you back to thinking the normal, everyday, traditional thing to do is a 30-year fix. That's why they call it a traditional mortgage. According to what law? The SAFE Act. Conforming loans, also called conventional sometimes, but conforming loans meet the standards of Fannie and Freddie. It conforms to the guidelines or the standards of who? Fannie and Freddie. Non-conforming loans do not meet the standards of who? Fannie and Freddie. So conforming loans meet the standards of Fannie and Freddie so they can be sold on the secondary market. Primary market is where we as people get loans. Secondary market is where lenders sell loans to one another. If it conforms to the standards of Fannie and Freddie, it can be sold on the secondary market. If it does not conform to the standards of Fannie and Freddie, it cannot be sold on the secondary market. It usually has to do with the size. That's why another name for non-conforming loans, jumbo loans. Jumbo loans. Subprime loans, what do you need to know about those? They allow more risk than prime loans. Highlight where I put allow more risk. Subprime loans allow more risk than prime loans. Secondary financing, when the borrower gets money from another source other than the primary. Anyone else is secondary. Secondary financing, when the buyer borrows money from another source other than the primary. Everybody else comes second. They're secondary. Mortgage terms. Mortgage terms. You have to know the difference between these. Fixed. What does that mean? It means the payment is fixed. It's not going to change. Interest only. Another name for interest only is straight note because you're paying straight interest. All you're paying is interest. Interest only loan, also known as a straight note. Adjustable rate mortgage, ARM. Adjustable rate mortgage, at some point the rate is going to adjust. Make sure you understand the difference between a fixed, interest only, and an adjustable. Notes, also known as promissory notes. Don't get it wrong just because they said the note. A note and a promissory note, that's the same thing. There are 4 that you need to know about. Straight note, which is the same as an interest only. A straight note is the same as interest only paying interest. A partially amortized note. That means it has a balloon payment. What type of promissory note has a balloon payment? A partially amortized loan. Negative AM. The monthly payment was not sufficient to cover the interest. They're going to ask you, what type of loan is it that you make a payment every month, but the balance still grows? That would be negative AM, negative amortization. The payment wasn't enough to cover all the interest, so they keep adding it to the back of the loan. Fully amortized. Now, another name for fully amortized loan is a self-liquidating loan. Another name for fully amortized, self-liquidating loan. They're going to ask you, what type of loan is it that the borrower makes a payment every month and for 30 years, and at the end of the 30 years, the whole thing is paid off? It liquidated itself. It paid off itself. That's fully amortized. So know the difference between straight, partially amortized, negative, and a fully amortized loan. Make sure you know that a partially amortized loan is the one that has a balloon payment. Make sure you know that another name for fully amortized is self-liquidating. Acceleration clause versus alienation clause. People get these mixed up all the time. I'm going to show you how I remember it, and hopefully you'll be like me and you'll never forget it after this. The difference between acceleration clause and alienation clause. I choose to focus on acceleration clause because when I think of acceleration clause, I think of an accelerator in a car. When I step on the accelerator, what does it do? This is my definition of acceleration clause. Write it down if you like, and then I'll go through theirs. Acceleration clause. Speeds up, steps on the gas. Speeds up when the payment is due because of default. Acceleration clause speeds up when the payment is due because of default. This is their definition. Gives the lender the right to declare the entire balance due immediately. Highlight immediately. We want all the money now. Why? Because of borrower default. Highlight default. In order for it to be acceleration, there always have to be two things: immediate and default. Immediate and default. We want all the money now because you're 60 days late, 90 days late, 100 days late. That doesn't matter. For it to be acceleration, immediate and default. If they want all the money for any other reason besides default, it's not acceleration. For it to be acceleration, immediate and default. We want all the money now because you're late. Acceleration clause. They stepped on the gas. They speed up when they want the money. But why did they do that? Because you're late. Now, alienation clause gives the lender the right, stated rights, when there is a transfer of ownership. Highlight transfer of ownership. You transferred who owned it. Another name for alienation is due on sale. So you sold it, you deeded it, you gave it away, you gifted it away, you quit claimed it. Whatever you did, you transferred the ownership. That's what makes it alienation clause. Transferred of ownership. Has nothing to do with being late or any of that. So make sure you clearly understand the difference between acceleration clause and alienation clause. Adjustable rate mortgage. ARM. Adjustable rate mortgage. There's some components that you need to know. Adjustable rate mortgage. It has three parts. You have to know what the three parts are: the index, the margin, and the rate. The index plus the margin equals the rate. The index plus the margin equals the rate. You need to know the index is the part that goes up and down. That's what makes it adjust. It's tied to things like coffee, cozy, LIBOR, prime. You don't need to know any of those for the test. You just need to know what part goes up and down, what part makes it adjust. The index is the part that makes it go up and down. The margin stays the same for the life of the loan. The margin is actually the profit that the bank makes. But the index plus the margin equals the rate. Index goes up and down. Margin stays the same for the life of the loan. buy downs. What are buy downs? Discount points paid to get a lower rate. The term buy down and the term discount points mean the same thing. Buy downs are discount points paid to get a lower rate. So I got a 6%. How many points can I pay to get it to 5% or 4%? Some lenders offer discount points, money that you can pay up front to get a lower rate. Those are called buy downs or discount points. You need to know that discount points are based on the loan amount, 1% of the loan amount. And the reason why that's important is that sometimes they're going to give you the sales price, the appraised value, and the loan amount. And they'll say calculate 3 points. Well, which one of those amounts do you calculate the points on? The loan amount. Points are always calculated based on the loan amount. Reverse mortgage. What do you need to know about a reverse mortgage? Well, the bar has to be at least 62. Most people know that. For a reverse mortgage, the bar has to be at least 62. Then they're going to ask you in a reverse mortgage what increases and what decreases. The balance of the loan rises, the equity shrinks. In a reverse mortgage, the balance of the loan rises, the equity shrinks. What is a HECM? Make sure you know that term. Highlight that, HECM. HECM, what does that stand for? Home Equity Conversion Mortgage. That's FHA's name for their reverse mortgage. Home Equity Conversion Mortgage, HECM. It's an FHA reverse mortgage. And tenure, what does it mean when the bar is getting their money the tenure method? Tenure simply means payment over time. They don't want it in a lump sum. They want the tenure method. They want to get a monthly check instead of make a monthly payment. They chose the tenure option. Now, when is a reverse mortgage over? Or when does it go away? What would make it go away? There's 4 reasons. Let's go back here. 4 reasons. The first one, if the bar passes away, the reverse mortgage goes away. If the bar sells the home, the reverse mortgage is over. If the bar ceases to live in the property for 12 consecutive months, highlight consecutive or underline consecutive. If the bar ceases to live in the property for 12 consecutive months, the reverse mortgage is over. Sometimes you have kids, my age, that tell the parents, hey, mom, dad, get a reverse mortgage. You got a lot of equity. Why are you struggling to pay your bills, buy your medicine, things of that nature when you have all this equity in this house? Get a reverse mortgage and you can get a monthly check instead of make a monthly payment. Heck, I'll even move in with you and help out. So they do that and they move in with the parents. They get a reverse mortgage. They're getting a monthly check and then they put the parents in the rest home and they're getting the check. If they find out mom and dad haven't been there for 12 consecutive months, then they're going to call the reverse mortgage and it's going to be over. They need to bring them home every now and then for a month or so. Okay? Other than that, they're in violation. Or you have some seniors that are pretty smart. They get a reverse mortgage. They are getting a monthly check. They go stay with their kid and rent out the house. Still fraud. If they find out they haven't been there for 12 consecutive months, then the reverse mortgage is over. You're not supposed to even do it for 1 month. But the question on the test, 12 consecutive months. Or if they don't pay their taxes and insurance, they can take the reverse mortgage away that way as well. So you need to know these 4 ways that a reverse mortgage can be terminated. Either the bar passes away, the bar sells the home, they cease to live in the home for 12 consecutive months, or they don't pay their taxes and insurance, then the lender can take the reverse mortgage away. And then they can have to start paying again. These are some terms that you need to know. So I'm going to have you highlight those. You need to know what a balloon payment is. A balloon payment is, and another name for a balloon payment is partially amortized loan. So make sure you know that another name for balloon payment is partially amortized loan. You need to know what a hybrid arm is. Hybrid. Well, hybrid car, what is that? It can be gas and electric, gas and electric. Well, hybrid mortgage can be fixed and adjustable, fixed and adjustable. Same concept. Bi-weekly mortgage. Bi-weekly mortgage. That's one that's set up where the borrower has to make a payment every other week. Not once a month, every other week. So they're going to ask you in a bi-weekly mortgage plan, How many payments are made in a year? 26. Blanket mortgage, highlight exactly this. Covers more than one parcel of land. A blanket mortgage covers more than one parcel of land. Sometimes you have developers that go out and they buy, land is divided into what's called parcels. And you will have a developer that go out and they buy a whole big lot that maybe consists of several parcels. They don't get a loan on each parcel. They get a blanket mortgage for all of that. And then they may build a house one at a time on each parcel. So a blanket mortgage covers more than one parcel of land. A bridge mortgage, it bridges the gap between one loan and another. For example, some banks offer what's called bridge mortgage. Say I'm selling my home to buy another home, but I need the money from the sale of my current home so that I can get the down payment for my new home. And in the perfect world, escrow, everything is working fine. This one sells, I get this money, and I put the down payment on this one. But what if my new house is ready and I need my money now, but my old house is still in escrow? You can go to a bank, and some banks will give you what's called a bridge mortgage, just enough to let you bridge the gap and close that deal. And then when your existing home sell, they get their money back immediately. That's a bridge mortgage, to bridge the gap. A cash out mortgage, also known as a refinance. Cash out mortgage or refinance. Number one, they have to know that they're starting their loan completely over. But more importantly for the test, in order for a bank to do a cash out mortgage, now they have to have what's called a net tangible benefit. Highlight that. They're going to ask you what type of loan must have a net tangible benefit, meaning they're not going to just do it unless it makes sense. You had loan originators that were refinancing people. Hey, we can save you $100, but the closing costs were like $6,000 and $7,000. Was that really beneficial? And then they go back to them the next year. We can save you another $50, another $6,000, $7,000 in closing costs. Nowadays, the CFPB says that there must be a net tangible benefit. Does that really make sense? Is saving that $50 worth $6,000, $7,000 in closing costs? Lenders have to make sure that there is actually a net tangible benefit if it's a refinance. They're going to ask you what kind of loan must have a net tangible benefit, and now you know if it's a cash out refinance. Net tangible benefit. That term only goes with refinances that have cash out. HELOC, home equity line of credit, and home equity loan. You have to know the difference between an open-end and closed-end HELOC or home equity line of credit. What is the difference between an open-end and closed-end? Well, open-end means you can go back and forth and get more money. Closed-end means once you borrow it and you pay it off, that's it. It's over. So open-end, I borrow or I get a HELOC for $20,000. I use 10 of it. Well, now I have $10,000 credit that I can go back and use whenever I want. Closed-end, I borrow $10,000. I use 5. I still have to pay the 5, but I can't go back and get another 5. That's closed. Open-end is more like a credit card where you can go back and forth. Closed-end, you're just paying it off. Do you guys get that? Construction mortgage, another name for construction mortgage that they used on the test, is interim loan. It's just a loan. It's an in-between loan. Construction mortgage is just the loan to buy the material and build the house. It's not the loan on the house. It's just for the construction and the building of the house. You still have to get another loan after that. That's where the takeout loan comes in. That's the permanent financing. Now, people want to use this term, and it's incorrectly. We're going to get a takeout loan to build a house. No. You're going to get a construction loan or an interim loan to build a house. And once it's built, then you're going to get a takeout loan, conventional or FHA or whatever. You're going to get an actual real loan on the house. That's what the takeout loan is. The construction mortgage is not the mortgage on the house. It's just for all the materials, the labor, and everything to actually build the house. Equity participation mortgage. Equity participation mortgage. They may just call it a participation mortgage, or they may call it a SAM, shared appreciation mortgage. What is that? That's a loan where the lender gets a part of your equity when you sell it. You agree with the lender that once you sell this house, you're going to give them back some of the equity that you earned. Well, why would you do that? Well, here's a situation. We had a borrower up in San Diego area. The house was worth, they owed over $1 million, $1,000,001, but it was only worth about $700,000. They were upside down, like way upside down. And they hadn't made a payment in like 18 months. Well, we worked with Bank of America, and we got Bank of America to forgive over $300,000 and forgive the back payments. So now their new loan is at the $700,000 that they actually owe. So their payments went down dramatically. That was a loan mod. But the deal was Bank of America says, we'll do this for you. But the deal is whenever you sell this house, we want 5% of the equity when you do that. Equity participation mortgage. Of course they did it. They got to stay in their beautiful San Diego home. Shared appreciation mortgage, equity participation mortgage. When the lender gets to participate or get a part of the equity when you sell the home. Package mortgage, highlight exactly this. A mortgage that includes personal property. Whenever you see the term personal property, they're talking a package mortgage. They're packaging in things like the stainless steel refrigerator, the microwave, the dishwasher. Sometimes you go into model homes where they're showing them and they say, oh, how much is if you include this refrigerator? Oh, we'll package that in. Oh, how much if I want to keep this, these lamps, these things? Those things are not free. They're packaging the price into the loan. That's what a package mortgage is. They're adding in personal property to the whole thing. Wraparound mortgage highlight exactly this. When an existing loan on a property is retained, so the lender is going to take over your existing loan, not start it over, not refinancing. The existing loan on the property is retained, and the lender gives the borrower a new larger loan. So I'm going to give you a loan. You have a loan. I'm going to take over that loan and give you a bigger loan. I'm going to wrap the loan that you already have in, and then I'm going to add another 40, 50, 100,000. We're wrapping your old loan into your new loan. You have a completely new loan. But now I took it over. I have your old loan, and when you make a payment, you're just making that one payment. That's what a wraparound loan is. They don't do those a whole lot anymore because it doesn't really make a whole bunch of sense. But it's when an existing loan is retained on the property. They didn't refinance it. They didn't pay it off. It's still there, but they give the borrower a new larger loan on the property. That's called a wraparound loan. Okay, so that's that section on non-traditional mortgages. So this part is going to be on mortgage loan origination. What you need to know in this particular section. You need to know what the process is. It starts with origination. Do not call yourself a loan officer. That means you are dating yourself and you didn't pay attention in class. You are a loan originator. That's the term or the terminology that CFPB wants us to use. You're a loan originator. I call us an information gatherer, collecting all the paperwork and getting it where it needs to be. So loan origination is where the process starts. Then it goes over to the processor. The processor doesn't approve anything. They're just basically verifying the information. And once it gets through processing, then it goes to the underwriter. That's the bank. That's who's actually making the decision. Number 1, 2, and 3 are all a part of the process. Originating, processing, and verifying. Originating, processing, and underwriting. That's a part of the process. Servicing is not a part of the process. Make sure you know that. Servicing is a result of the process if it's approved. Because remember, servicing is just taking the payments and paying the taxes and insurance. If it's never approved, it doesn't go to servicing. So originating, processing, and underwriting are a part of the process. If it's approved, it goes to servicing. If it's not approved, then it doesn't go to servicing. Now, application, URLA, Uniform Residential Loan Application, URLA. You need to know the two main types of applications used in the industry. Fannie Mae uses one called a Form 1003. Freddie Mac uses one called a Form 65. You need to know who Fannie uses. You need to know who Freddie uses in the industry. You need to know underwriting. There's two types of underwriting. Automated underwriting, done by a computer to save money, AUS, automated underwriting, and manual underwriting, the old-fashioned way with just a calculator and a pencil. You need to know the two main types of underwriting systems, computer systems used in the industry, and by whom. Fannie Mae uses one called DU, Desktop Underwriter. Freddie Mac uses a system called LP, Loan Prospector. You need to know who Fannie uses. You need to know who Freddie uses. Fannie Mae uses DU, Desktop Underwriter. Freddie Mac uses LP, Loan Prospector. You need to know conventional loans, and put in parentheses there conforming, because sometimes they call them conforming. Conventional conforming loans. This is what you need to know. They're not insured. Circle the word insured. And on top of insured, I want you to write FHA. So they're not insured or guaranteed. Circle the word guaranteed. And on top of guaranteed, I want you to put VA. So conventional loans are loans that are not insured, meaning they're not FHA, and they're not guaranteed, meaning they're not VA by any government entity. The ratios for a conventional loan, 28/36. This is what people tell me, well, I've seen other ratios for conventional. And this is when I tell you to pass the test. When you get this question, the ratios for conventional are 28/36. That's what the answer is to pass the test. No matter what you've done out there in the industry, if you want to pass the test, the ratios for conventional, 28/36. PMI is required if the borrower puts less than 20% down, meaning the LTV is higher than 80%. And listen to what I'm saying here because it goes right over people's head. The late fee is 5% of the P&I only, not the PITI, not the payment. They cannot charge you a late fee on the taxes and insurance portion. So they're going to try to trick you. The late fee is 5%, but the P&I portion only. And on the test, they're going to say the principal is $500, the taxes is $300, the insurance is $200, so on and so forth. Calculate the late fee. And you'll probably remember about the 5%, but did you remember to only calculate that on the P&I, the principal and the interest? They cannot charge late fee on the taxes and insurance portion. That's why you really need to make sure you go through all my tests so that I can trick you all the different ways they're going to trick you. Got that? Now, FHA loans. Circle the word insured. FHA loans are insured. The FHA does not lend the money. They just insure a portion of the funds in case the borrower goes into default. FHA loans are insured. Whenever you see the term insured, it means FHA. Down payment for FHA loan is 3.5%. And the ratios for FHA, no matter what you've seen out there in the world, to pass the test, the ratios for FHA, 31/43. 31/43. They're going to ask you, what is the maximum amount that the seller can contribute on an FHA loan? 6%. The occupancy requirement for an FHA loan, the borrower must move in within the first 60 days and stay a year. On an FHA loan, they want the borrower to move in within the first 60 days and agree to stay a year. FHA loans do not have PMI. They have MIP. Again, FHA loans do not have PMI. They have MIP, mortgage insurance premium. And they also have what's called UF MIP, upfront mortgage insurance premium. You don't have to know how long it lasts and when it's going to stop. Or you don't need to know any of that for the test. Just make sure you have this straight. What kind of loans have PMI? Conventional. What kind of loans have MIP? FHA. What kind of loans have UF MIP, a one-time fee? FHA. Just keep it that simple and pass the test. No prepayment penalty. The late fee is 4% of the P&I only. 4% of the P&I only. VA loans. The term they use is guaranteed. VA loans, guaranteed. The VA does not lend the money, but what they're saying is give this veteran, this guy or this girl, a chance. Let them get into this house with no money down. If they go into foreclosure, don't worry. We guarantee you X amount. VA loans are guaranteed. The money still comes from a bank. It comes from a VA-approved bank. VA loans are guaranteed. The maximum guarantee that any veteran can get is 25% of the purchase price or the appraised value. Make sure you know that. What is the maximum, no matter how long they've been in the service? What is the maximum guarantee that a veteran can get is 25% of the purchase price or the appraised value. VA loans have 2 documents that are needed for eligibility. One is a DD-214, discharge paperwork, and the other is called a COE, certificate of eligibility. The COE tells what their maximum amount that they will be qualified for. The VA only cares about one ratio, the back end. They don't have 2. But the back end ratio cannot be higher than 41%. There are 2 names for VA appraisals. One is called a CRV, certificate of reasonable value. The other is called a NOV, notice of value. Those are just 2 names for VA appraisals. Now, VA loans have what's called a non-refundable variable funding fee. Highlight that term. That term is only associated with VA loans. What kind of loan has a non-refundable variable funding fee? They don't have to make a down payment, but they have to pay a variable funding fee. Variable because it can change. You don't have to know the different amounts it can change. But you do need to know who is this fee waived for. Disabled vets, because they got hurt, and surviving spouses. For VA loan, they have to move in within the first 60 days and stay a year. Move in within the first 60 days and stay a year. They do have to have what's called residual income. So write that down. What kind of loan must have residual income? That's a requirement of a VA loan. That means they have to have some money left over to eat and live and things of that nature. So VA loans do have to have what's called residual income. The borrower must move in within the first 60 days and stay a year. The maximum that the lender can charge for their fees is 1%, and the late fee is 4% of the P&I only. 4% of the P&I only. USDA loans. People say, oh my God, we're doing loans for meat and cattle. No. A USDA loan is a type of a mortgage loan. And it's very popular here in California. Most people don't know about it because we have a lot of rural land. Like what used to be Paris, California, Elsinore, Hemet, all of those areas. A lot of those people got what's called USDA loans. But it could be anywhere in any state. It is another name for USDA loan or Section 502 loans. 100% financing to buy or build a property in a rural development. Rural means small towns, or also you want to put their farm communities. 100% financing. They're going to ask you, where does the money come from for a USDA loan? Because it does not come from a bank. It comes from the Department of Agriculture. No maximum loan amount, no prepayment penalty. The late fee is 4% of the P&I only. Appraisal approaches, there are 3, and you need to know when each will be used. Appraisal approaches. You have the sales comparison approach. That's the most popular approach, the everyday approach. They also call that the market approach. Don't get it wrong because they call it the market approach. Sales comparison and market is the same thing. There has to be a minimum of 3 comps. Then you have the cost approach, also called the replacement cost approach. When did they use this? Vacant land, highlight that. New construction, highlight that. Unusual or special purpose property. Let's talk about unusual. Sometimes there's some really crazy, wacky architecture, geometrical or geoside, different kind of architectural, where they can't really compare that to something else. So they will use this one if it's unusual. Or special purpose, It's a hospital. It's a school. It's a church. It's only for that one purpose. They will use this approach. Also, they call it the replacement cost approach because they use it if they are appraising something that was damaged due to a natural disaster. So say if it was burnt down because of Hurricane Katrina, or it was in an earthquake, or it was in a fire or a flood, what approach would they use? The replacement cost approach. An income approach is pretty self-explanatory. If the purpose of the property is to generate income for the borrower, it's a store, it's a laundromat, it's some kind of business, it's an auto lot, they would use the income approach. As it relates to employment, if a borrower is self-employed, they're going to want to see a minimum of 2 years tax return. This is where people tell me, but I've seen banks that have done this, that, or the other. I'm just telling you, if you want to pass the test and you get this question, and they actually, for self-employed borrower, they have to have a minimum of 2 years tax return. If they're not self-employed, they're what's called a wage earner. They get a check. They're going to want to see that they've been in the same field, the same line of work for 2 years. I did not say they had to be on the same job. I just said they had to be in the same line of work. If they're not in the same line of work, what are they going to want? Some type of certification or certificate or proof of schooling as to why they made the change. Alimony and child support are the only kind of income that are optional whether or not the borrower wants to use them. They don't have to use their child support and alimony. That's optional if they want to use it. But if they do want to use it, you have to know what law says the lender must accept it. Do you guys remember? If it's alimony or child support and the borrower wants to use it, what law says that the lender cannot refuse to take it? ECOA, because it's considered public assistance. So make sure you remember that. In alimony and child support, they have to show that it's going to continue for at least 3 years. Tax-free income, meaning public assistance income, is grossed up. Highlight that term, grossed up, and put in your notes, increased by 25%. For the test, is increased by 25%. Tax-free income, Social Security, disability, child support, alimony, they increased that by 25%. So you're going to get a question that says, John gets $1,000 a month Social Security income. How much is the underwriter going to count? $1,250. They increase it by 25%. You have to remember that. They're not going to remind you about that. Sally gets $1,000 a month child support. How much counts? $1,250. One question someone asked me, or people ask me over and over and over again in the Facebook group, they don't understand why they keep getting it wrong. Because my question is, Danny gets paid $13.50 an hour, and he gets $500 a month alimony. What the people keep doing wrong in the Facebook group is they're not increasing the alimony by 25%, and that's why they keep getting it wrong. Do you get that? Yeah. Tax-free income must be, and you have to remember it. They're not going to remind you. It has to be increased by 25%.
The alimony child support, if you do use it, you have to show that it's continued for 3 years, or not use it at all.
They're not gonna give you credit for it unless you can prove. If the kid is 18 and not in college, they're gonna look at the award letter. It stops. So they're not gonna let them use that because it's not gonna continue. Now, rental income is reduced by 25%. So if I get $1,000 a month because I rent my room, they're only going to give me credit for $750. The other 25% is what's used for what's called vacancy factor. 4506T, what is that? A 4506T is a form that the lender uses to get a transcript of the borrower's tax return. Transcript. They will use what's called an 8821 to get a full copy of the borrower's tax return, but they use a 4506T for a transcript or a summary of the borrower's tax return. Now, in calculating the math, I'm going to give you some tips that you need to write down and remember. Okay? These are some tips that they expect that you already know when dealing with the math, so write these down. Number one tip that I'm going to give you. Always start with the gross monthly income. They are not going to remind you about that. To do any of the math, and you'll see it here in a second, you have to start with the gross monthly income. They may give it to you hourly, weekly, daily, yearly, but before you can do the math problem, you have to start with the gross monthly income, or your problem is going to be wrong. So that's my first tip. My second tip, understand the difference between bi-weekly and bi-monthly. If you don't understand the difference between getting paid bi-weekly, every other week, so there's 26 pay periods, and bi-monthly, twice a month, there's only 24 pay periods, your math problem is going to be wrong. That's tip number 2. Tip number 3, whenever they give you the sales price and the appraised value, because they're always going to give you way more than what you need for the math problem. So sometimes in the math problem, they're going to give you the sales price and the appraised value. Which one do you think you use for the problem? For the test, you're going to use whichever is lower for the math. So whenever they give you a problem, and most people don't know that, whenever they give you a problem, they give you the sales price and the appraised value, you have to use whichever is lower for the math. So those are my tips that you need to know going into the math, because they expect that you already know this. Okay, they expect that you already know this. So take out your phone or whatever you're using for a calculator, and let's do these few math problems. The first thing I'm going to show you how to calculate is what's called LTV, loan to value. Calculating LTV, loan to value. This is the formula for calculating LTV. You take the first loan amount and divide it by whatever is lower, the sales price and the appraised value. Press equal and just read what it says. I cannot tell you how many times people they're still adding this and they're still adding. I'm like, what are they doing? You take the sales price, you take the first loan amount and you divide it by whatever is lower, the sales price and the appraised value. Just press equal. For the CLTV, combined loan to value, you're going to take the first loan amount and the second loan amount and divide it by whatever is lower. Press equal and just read it. For LTV is just the first divided by whatever is lower. CLTV is the first and the second divided by whatever is lower. Here is your problem. If you have a home that has an appraised value of $120, it has a sales price of $125. The loan amount on the first is $90,000. The loan amount on the second is $10,000. Calculate the LTV and the CLTV, and I'll let you know if you're right or wrong. Take a few minutes to do that. So the LTV, you have to take the first loan amount, which is what, $90,000, and divide it by whatever is lower, 120, press equal. What did you get? 75. And for the CLTV, the 90,000 plus the 10,000, divided by whatever is lower, and just press equal. So the 90,000 plus the 10,000 divided by 120,000, and you should have gotten 83% LTV. That's how you calculate LTV and CLTV. So the next one I'm going to show you is calculating ratios. How to calculate ratios. We call them the front and the back ratio, or the top and the bottom. But on the test, they call it calculating the HER. I was like, well, who is she, the HER? Housing expense ratio. You need to know that term. What do they mean when they say housing expense ratio? Well, to us, that means the front end or the top ratio. You got to take the house note, the PITI, and divide it by the gross monthly income. The PITI divided by the gross monthly income, and just press equal. For the back end, or what they call the TOR, total obligation ratio, you're going to take the PITI plus their debt. And remember, you're only going to be counting debt that's going to show up on the credit report. Not like the soccer dues or all of that stuff. Just debt that will show up on the credit report. But there's two things you have to remember about the back end. If it has 10 payments or less, if it's credit with 10 payments or less, you don't count it. Unless it's a lease. If it's a lease, I don't care if it has 1 payment or 100 payments. You have to count it every single time. So pay attention to the problem. Did it say an auto loan with 6 payments left? Or did it say an auto lease with 6 payments left? That's going to make a difference. Do you guys get that? You have to understand that. So here is your problem. Smith's annual income is $60,000. Their house note or their PITI is $1,550. Their debt is $450. Calculate the front end and the back end, and we'll see if you're right or wrong. Calculate the front end and the back end. So the first thing you had to do is calculate the gross monthly income. The gross monthly income, $60,000 divided by 12, should have been $5,000. Then you can calculate the front, which would have been $1,550 divided by the 5,000. You would have gotten 31%. And then you're going to calculate the back, which would have been the $1,550 plus the $450 divided by the 5,000. The back end would be $40,000. That's how you calculate the front end and the back end. 40%. Yeah, 40%. So now we're going to do what's called calculating maximum mortgage payment. 3 steps. Okay? Although there's probably tons of other ways to do this, if you do it this way that I'm showing you, your answer will always come out right. And someone always wants to show me a different way to do it. I don't want to know that. I just want to know the way I know. Step 1, step 2, step 3. If you do it this way, it's always going to come out right. Step number 1, also you should know there's some problems that if you have not memorized the ratios, you wouldn't be able to do them in the first place. You have to memorize the ratios. Going into the test, you need to know what the ratio is for FHA, conventional, and VA. You're supposed to know that. Okay? So this is this problem. This is how you calculate maximum mortgage payment. Step number 1, you're going to take the gross times the front ratio. In the problem, they'll tell you if it's FHA or if it's conventional, and you need to know that ratio. The gross times the front ratio. Press equal. Step number 2, the gross times the back ratio, subtract the debt. The gross times whatever the back ratio is minus the debt. Write that number down. Step number 3 says, look at both of those numbers you just wrote down. Whichever is the lowest is the answer to the problem. And people ask me, well, how come I can't just do step 1? Well, how are you going to know what's lower if you didn't do them both? Follow instructions. Step 1 says take the gross times the front ratio. Step 2 says take the gross times the back ratio minus the debt. Step 3 says look at both of those. Whichever is the lowest is the answer for the exam. Here is your problem. A borrower has a stable monthly income of $4,000. They have debt of $600. They're getting an FHA loan. So hopefully you've memorized the ratios for FHA. Because if not, how are you going to do it? What is the maximum monthly payment that the borrower will qualify for? Go ahead and do step 1, do step 2, and do step 3. Step 1 says take the gross times the front ratio. Well, the front ratio for FHA is what? 31%. Step number 2 says take the gross times the back ratio, 43%, and minus the debt. Step number 3 says whatever number is the lowest, that's the answer to the problem. If they ask you to calculate maximum mortgage payment, this is what you do. Step 1, step 2, and step 3. This is the steps to calculating maximum mortgage payment. These are the ratios that you just have to memorize. My biggest thing when I was doing the test and studying for this is I was always confused. Am I supposed to multiply something or am I supposed to divide something? I don't know. Is this a multiplication problem or a division problem? I hate math. Which one do I do? Well, this is what I learned, and write it down here. If they're asking you to calculate a ratio, that's a division problem. If they're asking you to calculate a ratio, that's a division problem. If they're asking you to calculate a payment amount, that's always a multiplication problem. Once I learned that, then I was able to figure out, am I supposed to multiply or divide? If they say, what is the ratio for, well, that's division. What is the payment amount for it? Then that's multiplication. Got it? Now, the math part stresses a lot of people out, but just know they can't give you more than 7 math problems. That's the max. You can even miss all the 7 math problems and still get pass the test. I did a string, I think just yesterday or whatever, because my students were killing me with all the math problems. They were stressing so much on the math problems. And I had to let them know, you guys should be concentrating on regulation this, that, and the other, and FACRA or whatever. You're going to have 25 or 30 of those. Most people get 4 math problems. That's it. But the most that they can give you is 7. If you join the Facebook group, look at the string. We asked the last few test takers, how many math problems you got? The majority was 3 or 4. How many hours did you spend studying math? Tons. For 3 or 4 problems, you should have been concentrating on some of the other areas. I'm not saying don't do the math, but I'm just saying if you're going to stress out on something, don't let it be math, let it be federal. Make sense? You're going to get 25 or 30 of those. You're going to get 4 or 5 math problems. Okay? Now, ethics. Ethics is all about right or wrong, things you should have learned in kindergarten. Be fair, tell the truth, be honest. They're going to give you scenarios. If it sounds bad, it probably is. Okay? So most people really don't have a problem with ethics because if it sounds like somebody is being cheated, they probably are being cheated. But there's some definitions that I need to make sure that you know. You need to make sure you know the difference between actual fraud. It was done on purpose. You knew it was fraud. You saw them over there making up those check stubs. You even helped them figure out the calculations. Actual fraud or constructive fraud. You had no idea that they did this. You just went by what they said. You also have to know the difference between fraud for property and who commits that. Homeowners or potential homeowners. Fraud for property and fraud for profit. Who does that? Now let's talk about fraud for property first. Fraud for property. Lying on their application, making up check stubs, making up tax returns, using straw buyers. Why are these people committing this fraud? Because they want the property. They're not trying to get money. They want the house. So who commits fraud for property? Potential homeowners, borrowers, consumers. Fraud for profit, that's about money. Write down the term industry insiders. They're going to ask you who commits fraud for profit? Industry insiders, people inside the industry for money, charging you to verify your employment, charging you to not look up this on the title, different things like that. That will be fraud for profit. It's committed by industry insiders. An appraiser charging you to give you a good value, or the tax person, CPA, charging you for a profit and loss statement. Why are they doing that? They want money. They want money. Industry insiders commits fraud for profit. Now here are a few terms, mortgage schemes that you need to know. Heir loan. What is an heir loan? There's not even a property. They made up the address. It used to happen a lot. You would get a person that would make up an address and get it to their appraisal friend and says, hey, put this address on one of your old appraisals and send it to me. If we get this deal done, we'll give you a cut. Then they get to their inside person at the mortgage company. Hey, see if you can walk this through. If we get this done, we'll give you a cut. And sometimes they will get a loan on a property and commission on a property that doesn't even exist. That's called an heir loan. So whenever you see the term non-existent loan or no collateral, of course they couldn't do it anymore because they check and recheck. But for the test, you need to know what is the definition of an heir loan, non-existent property. They made it all up. You also need to know deed scam. What is that? When they scam someone out of their deed. Happens a lot in loan mods. Sign your property over to us and we're going to help you fix your credit, get you straight, and then we'll give you back your property. And they'd find some reason not to give the people back their property. They scammed them out of their deed. Double sold loans. Double sold loans used to happen a lot. You'd have these mortgage bankers that would set up LLCs, Nevada Corporation, this corporation. And what they would do is they would have a property and they would sell it to two different lenders on the secondary market. Because it used to be a time where in order for something to show up on your credit or public record, it took 30, 45 days. And what they would do is they would sell it to two different lenders on the secondary market. One didn't know it was already purchased by the other. They got paid the $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, and they just dissolved the LLC and go do it again. Double sold loans. Unrecorded silent second. What makes that unethical? If you have a lien against someone or someone has a lien against you, it is supposed to be recorded at the county recorder's office. You're not supposed to wait till the last minute. I lost the deal last week because at the last minute, someone had an unrecorded thing and they found out the property was being sold and they went and they recorded it really fast. If there is a lien on the property, it's unethical, not illegal, but unethical to hold on to it. They're supposed to have that recorded at the county recorder's office, and it's supposed to be public record that there are liens on this property. Unrecorded or silent seconds. Equity skimming, making rescue loans to people when you know the borrower can't pay. This happened a lot in Stated, and a lot of people got in homes and couldn't even make the first payment. The loan originator, because the borrower had a good credit score, stated their income. But he doesn't have a job. Oh, I don't have to prove that he have a job because he had a 750 credit score. And all the lender wants is the credit report. But you know he doesn't have a job. Oh, he promises me if they get the loan, their cousins, their family, their friends, they're going to come up with the money. But you know he doesn't have a job. That's unethical, making loans to people when you know they don't have the ability to repay. Can't do that anymore, but that was called equity skimming. Loan flipping, refinancing them over and over again when there's no net tangible benefit. Costing $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 in closing costs, but all you saved them was $50, $60. That's what that one is. Straw buyer, using someone else's name to buy the property. But the lender thinks that they're the one that's staying there. For example, if I get my loan in my sister's name, because she has better credit than I do, and every month when I make the payment, I make it under her name, she will be a straw buyer. Can't do that. Okay. 3 other ones that you need to know: bait and switch, an alluring but insincere offer to sell a product or service. It sounds good. I'm going to tell you whatever I need to tell you to get you in the door. I'm going to make all kind of promises just to get this appointment and get you here. But once I get you here, I'm going to say, okay, so let me tell you what I really want to show you. But what about all that stuff we just talked about? All you did was lure them in on something that you really didn't want to talk about. Switch after sale, you took a deposit. And then you switched it. If you take any deposit, or our company takes any deposit, for example, say that there's a 70-inch TV for sale. And you call, say, Best Buy or whatever, and you say, I hear that you have a 70-inch TV for sale. I'd like to know more about it. Yeah, but we only have 3 left. If you give me a deposit, I'll hold it for you. But then I give them a deposit, and I drive all the way down there, and they say, well, we don't have the one we talked about, but let me show you this. Then why did you take my deposit? That's called switch after sale, because they took money. Now, bona fide offer, you have to make sure if it's a service or a product that you're offering, that you can actually provide it. They do that a lot with Black Friday sales. The first 100 people, we're going to give you this Xbox for $40. But they only got 30 Xboxes. And they got all these people sleeping there. It's not a bona fide offer. How are you going to give it to the first 100 people if you only have 30? That would make it not a bona fide offer. Do you get that? Safe Act. You need to know, this is the part of the test Why you don't have to take a separate California test anymore. You only have to take one test now. And you can do loans in over 40 or so states. Because you passed the national test exam with UST, Uniform State Test Component. You need to know that HERA is the law that created the SAFE Act. What law created the SAFE Act? HERA. You need to know that the SAFE Act stands for the Secure, not the Safe, the Secure and Fair Enforcement Act. And make sure you know that the N in NMLS stands for nationwide, not national, nationwide. So make sure you know those three things. HERA is the law that creates the SAFE Act. The SAFE Act stands for the Secure, not Safe. And the N stands for nationwide. And sometimes they ask you, what does the R stand for? The R stands for registry. You need to know what two entities created the entire NMLS system. Highlight CSBS, that's one, along with the AARMR, highlight that one. Those are the two organizations that created this entire NMLS system. They're going to say the CSBS and the AARM created the NMLS. You are a loan originator if you're taking a loan application or negotiating a mortgage. A lot of people out there should have this license and they're still doing, they're calling them junior processors or things like that, and they should really have this license. If they are negotiating mortgages, discussing rates, things of that nature, they're supposed to have this license. So if you're taking applications or negotiating mortgages, you're supposed to have this license. Okay? If you get caught, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. If all you are really doing is administrative and clerical, you don't have to have this license. So if all you're doing is administrative and clerical, you're not discussing rates and terms and things of that nature, you're fine. You're just doing paperwork. If you're only doing timeshares, you don't have to have this license. If you only need to do a loan for a member of your immediate, underline immediate, family member, you don't have to have this license. I don't want to be in the loan business. I'm just trying to help my daughter with a loan. I got to get licensed to do a loan for my daughter? No, that's my immediate family member. Or my mom, immediate family member. You don't have to. Then they're going to ask you, does a processor or an underwriter have to have a license? And everybody wants to say no. But the answer should be, it depends. Who do they process or underwrite for? That's going to determine whether or not they should be licensed. Who do they process or underwrite for? If they process or underwrite for an FDIC insured bank, then no, they are not licensed. They are what's called registered. But if they're an independent processor or underwriter, then the answer is yes. Case in point, my sister works for Chase. She has an NMLS number just like I do. She does the same thing, process, underwrites, does loans, but she can only do them for Chase. She is what's called a registered loan originator. She doesn't have to take this test. She doesn't have to do continuing education. She doesn't have to do the class. She doesn't have to do anything. Get up, comb your hair, go to Chase, got hired. That's it. They give her a number. It's registered to Chase. But I have a friend. Her name is Shawn Davis. She's a processor. She works from home. She has her own processing company. It's called Unique Processing. She does some processing for me, for some other people that I know, for a few banks as a contractor. She has to do the same thing we have to do. She had to take the test. She has to do continuing education. She has to pay all the fees. So the question is, when they pass out their business cards, who do they represent? If they represent an FDIC insured bank, then no, they are what's called registered. They don't have to do any of this. Yeah, they have a number just like us, but they don't have to do any of this. But if they're representing themselves, their own company, then yes, they have to do the same exact things that we have to do. So don't get that wrong, because they're going to give you a lot of questions in this section about whether or not a processor or underwriter has to be licensed. It depends on when they pass out how do they represent themselves to the public? Do they work for a bank? Then no, then they're registered. Or do they work for themselves? Then they're licensed just like us. Registered loan originators work for a bank. No other really way to say it. State licensed loan originators, all the rest of us. Everybody has a number. Either your number is registered, work for a bank, or your number is license. All this money, time, energy, effort that we have to do. That's all it means. You have to have never lost your license in the past. If you lose this license, go learn something else. They will never, ever give it back to you. It used to be a time I lost my license in Texas, let me move to Utah. Oh, I messed up in Utah, let me move to Jersey. Not anymore. That's why they have us on a registry. If you lose this license, just go learn something else. You have to have not pled guilty of a felony in the past 7 years. But if the felony dealt with money crimes, ever. So if you had a felony in the past 7 years that didn't have to do with money, Ponzi schemes, all of that, you're okay. But if you had a felony and it dealt with money crimes, you'll never get it. I could have committed felony manslaughter 10 years ago. I'll get licensed. If I committed felony Ponzi scheme 150 years ago, I'll never get it. The only exception is if I got pardoned by the governor. So you need to know that. If you got pardoned, then they'll let you in. You have to do 20 hours of pre-licensing, highlight the 20. But they're going to ask you, of that 20 hours, how many hours had to be federal? How many hours had to be ethics? How many hours had to be non-traditional? And you see that other 12 hours, for those of you that took this class, the 20-hour class online, that's why you didn't pass. That other 20 hours of fluff that they put in there. Okay, and then you studied that stuff for the test. The test consists of 3 hours of federal, 2 hours of ethics, 2 hours of non-traditional. The other 12 hours, the instructor could have talked about whatever they wanted. Probably sound real good. Probably stuff you need to know to be in the business, but not necessarily what you needed to know to pass the test. And that's why people in online classes have a hard time. You don't know what to study, and you're studying way more stuff than you need to. Of the 8 hours, you have to know how many federal never changes, how many non-traditional, how many ethics. And you have to know the term successive year rule. Highlight that. That just means you cannot take the same continuing education class every year. You can go back to the same school. We have our students come back every year, but each year we have to teach something different. If we don't change our curriculum, they're not going to get credit. Successive year rule. You can't get credit for the same exact course. This map, and it needs to be updated now, this map, and in your email that I'm going to send you in a minute, you'll have an updated one. All the ones here in the blue and the yellow, once you pass this test, you can do loans in all those states. This is what I need you to do on your paper. Circle Minnesota, all the way up there in the top. Circle Minnesota. And circle West Virginia. As of today, every state on this map besides those two are now blue. Which means once you pass this test, you can do loans in all of the states except for Minnesota and West Virginia. I have family in Texas. I do their loans here, even though my sister works for Chase. But everybody doesn't qualify for a Chase loan. I do their refis here. I have people here that own property in New York or Pennsylvania, or they got family there. I help them here. Once you pass this test, you can do loans in all these states. Now, some states require additional education. For example, look at Nebraska. It says 22 hours. Well, you've already done the 20 hours. If you want to do a loan in Nebraska, go online to my website, do the 2 hours. Next. Learn about Nebraska. Look at Connecticut. You have a loan in Connecticut. You've already done the 20 hours. Go online and do the 1 hour. You don't have a loan in any of these states? Then don't worry about it. Make sense? You need to know the term state regulatory authority. Highlight that. State regulatory authority. The state regulatory authority is what I call your babysitter. The state regulatory authority. They're going to ask you on the exam, what can the state regulatory authority do and not do? That is who you are licensed under. State regulatory authority. Just happen to be in California, we have the BRE and the DBO. But in Texas, it's called something different. In New York, it's called something different. In Pennsylvania, it's called something different. So you're not going to need to know that for the exam. You're just going to need to know the term state regulatory authority. Who do you have to report to? Now, the state regulatory authority is responsible for supervising you, making sure you're registered, conducting investigations. They can deny you, suspend. They're your babysitters. That's who is in charge of you during this mortgage licensing. I need you to highlight the last 3 bullets. Those are the most important ones that you need to know for this exam. You have to have each state has to have what's called protection options, because most loan officers really don't know what they're doing in the beginning. So if you go out there and get sued, where does the money come from? Because we don't have money either. Well, either they're going to require that you have a minimum net worth. If you don't have a minimum net worth, which there's some guidelines to that, then they're going to want you to get bonded. Just like if you're a notary, you have to have E&O insurance. They're going to require that you get bonded. Most companies will pay for a bond for you. Or if you're a real estate agent, you pay dues already, and each state has what's called a state recovery fund. So they're going to ask you on the exam, what are the 3 protection options that each state regulatory authority have to have in place? They're either going to require a net worth, surety bonding, or state recovery fund. Those are the 3, and you need to know them by name. You also need to remember, or you need to know, that a state regulatory authority cannot issue a prison sentence. They ask that a lot. They're going to say, which of the following things can they not do? They cannot send you to jail. They can take your license. They can suspend your license. They can give you a fine, but they don't get to send you to jail. Now, they may send your case over to the district attorney and let him send you to jail, but for the test, the state regulatory authority does not issue a prison sentence. The penalty for violating the SAFE Act, $25,000. Highlight that. The penalty for violating the SAFE Act, $25,000. If you don't want to pay that $25,000, do not do any of the things that I have on these next 2 pages. Because if you do, you will be fined $25,000. But you couldn't do any of them anyway. Can you practice without a license? No. Can you defraud borrowers? No. Can you break the rules? No. Can you beat up the appraiser because he didn't give you the value that you wanted? No. Can you take the people's deposit money and go pay your own bills with it? No. Any of those things would be a violation of the SAFE Act. And if you do any of them, you will be fined what? $25,000. And that brings us to the end of that. Now, I've made you guys some charts. Okay? So you want to pay attention to these because this is going to help you. You need to know what came after what. Look at here. HERA came first. Then came the SAFE Act. The SAFE Act is actually Title V of HERA. You need to know that. FACRA, Regulation V, came first. And then the FACT Act, which has Section 114 rules. What are those? Red flag identity theft rules. What are the 3 things under the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act? Safeguarding, pretexting, financial privacy. What are the 3 things under the Fair Housing Act? Blockbusting, steering, and redlining. What are all of the things that make Tilla the Godzilla? You need to know all of these laws are under Tilla. They're going to say Hope Alone is part of which larger law? Tilla. Section 32, part of which larger law? Tilla. And on and on and on. All of these things are under Tilla. This is why we call Tilla the Godzilla. You need to know here with ECOA and FACRA, and make notes right here on your paper. They're going to say, what is a protected class under both ECOA and fair housing? And look at the first 5. Sex, race, religion, color, national origin. Those are protected under fair housing and ECOA. But then they're going to say, what's protected only under ECOA? Age, marital status, receipt of public assistance. What's protected only under fair housing? Disability and familiar status. But you're going to get a lot of questions that says, what's protected by ECOA but not fair housing? What's protected by fair housing but not ECOA? What's protected by both fair housing and ECOA? And you're going to be happy that we made this chart. Okay? This next one, FACRA versus FACT Act. Remember I told you one of them you get a free credit report if, and the other one I told you has no if. So under FACRA, write if. You can get a free copy of your credit report if, and you can go back to the page where I gave you the 4 reasons why you can get a free copy of your credit report under FACRA. But remember, FACT Act, you don't have to have a reason. So write no if. Under FACT Act, you get a free copy of your credit report once a year. You don't have to have a reason. Know which one you have to have the reason for and which one you don't have to have the reason for. Do you get that? And then I think I got happy and gave you guys the charts over and over and over again. But that's pretty much it.